The broadcast is live. Here we are for another night of talking comics.
Whee!
Minus Tim off on his romantic getaway or something like that.
Yeah, he
So
doesn't
we
talk
can
about comics. That's why he's married. We should stop talking about comics.
He's right.
Those funny books. They'll be our ruin.
Oh wow, there's automatic mic adjust volume, echo cancellation. Wonder if I can.
That's cool.
Turn Paolo's. Talk again, Paolo.
Yeah, I suppose my mic's kind of weird. I really don't know how to balance the sounds.
I just turned up your volume a little bit. So
You did?
I don't quite. Yeah, I can do that. It turns out, at least to my little speaker. I don't know. I don't know what mine sounds like. I hope I'm. I have a good mic, so I'm usually loud enough. But I just turned up your. There's the three little dots here that we now I can mute you or edit your mic settings, and one of them is it's in its beta that I can turn you up a little.
He has the power.
The power of sound.
Cool. Sanctuary of Reality is here. Look at that.
Nothing to do on a Friday night.
Yeah, well, welcome to the world. Not that I had tons of things to do on Friday nights before COVID, but I certainly don't now.
Yeah, it does tend to cut down on your options.
Yeah, it does. In my youth, I had more things to do on a Friday night, but I stayed in and made art a lot of Friday nights, too. All depending. Mm-hmm.
Saw that
Comic Crack is here.
I saw that, Christopher Plummer passed away.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
He did.
Comic Crack likes your haircut. Yeah, Christopher. I was like, Christopher Plummer is still alive? I didn't even realize.
He was, yeah.
He's one of those guys. When's the last thing he was? I don't think I've paid attention to Christopher Plummer in a real long time. So
I'm trying to think what the last thing I saw him in was. That's a good question.
I mean, being that he was in his 90s, right?
Right.
He could have easily not been in something in 20 years.
Right.
So. And what was his most? He was in The Sound of Music. They said I didn't really read anything.
No, he was probably most famous.
He was in Knives Out. Oh, okay. I did watch that. I didn't. Wow, I didn't realize he was in it. He's one of those actors I always took for granted. I never sought out Christopher Plummer movies or anything like that. But when he showed up in a movie, it was cool because he was good.
Right.
Yeah.
So I totally took him for granted.
Speaking of, I was just thinking about that. I don't know if we've ever had this conversation on this show. Are there any particular actors that you do seek out intentionally?
I don't know. I'm not that much of a movie person.
Okay.
So I don't think there is. I especially the last few years, I do what I call watching movies old man style, where I watch them 20 minutes at a time because I just can't put my full attention on a movie for 2 hours. I just watched. I cycle outside even during the winter, but when it gets below 20 degrees Fahrenheit, I usually don't go out. And if it's snowing out, I don't go out.
Right.
So like between this blizzard and the cold snap before it, I think my last 4 rides have been on a stationary bike. So I managed to watch a movie in 4 sections on the stationary bike. Peninsula. So that was kind of like,
Yeah, I only watch movies 2 or 3 years after they come out. Maybe 10.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think he did play a German in a bunch of war movies.
Oh, there's a lot of actors that were active and so like anywhere from like the early to mid 60s up through the 80s that were in a ton of war movies.
Yeah. Because there were tons of war movies. Old man style sounds like my having 2 kids under the age of 5 style. Probably something like that.
Hopefully Tommy gets to pick his own movies instead of having, being forced to watch what the kids wants to watch, 24/7. Yeah.
Usually Revenant. Yeah, I mean, I used to watch more. I also have there's a section of movies and TV that I call that I was discussed with Dave Sharp, who's been a letterer all these years and used to work in the Marvel bullpen too. Movies that are good to work to. Because when you're by yourself, like at your drawing table, him doing lettering, me doing whatever heck I was working on, it's like you put on movies or TV shows in the background, but you really can't watch them because you're working, but you listen to them. So there's certain movies that are good to listen to. Just maybe sit down and watch a part and then go back to work.
Yeah, there's a few movies that I'd be flipping channels or whatever, and regardless if I had seen that movie before or how many times I had seen that movie before, I would stop and watch the rest of it. Now, a good example of that was the Blues Brothers.
Yeah.
Anytime funny how that I'll just stop and watch it the whole way through.
Now in the age of everything on demand and streaming, that doesn't happen anymore. It's like people don't usually watch. I mean, I used to do that too. I used to, I'd have HBO or something.
I don't do as much as I used to. Yeah.
And I just I'm just turning. Oh, there's some movie. Oh, I'll sit there and watch it. But now everything's on demand, so that chance watching of something doesn't happen.
That's what the people that actually still get up and put a disc in the Blu-ray player.
I was feeling like a little nostalgia tonight. Here, let me pull this out of its Mylar. I got this, I think, a year or so ago, and it's been sitting out on top of. This is the. Let me see if I can solo layout me. This is Marvel Age number 111. And I got this. It's from, let me get the year for you. Early 90s, 1992. And I got this out of, besides the fact that it's a John Romita drawing with all the John Romita women. In the back here is his wife, Virginia, saying, "John, where's that Marvel Age cover?" And she was my boss at Marvel. She was in charge of the bullpen. Gotcha. And so this is, I mean, besides being an excellent John Romita cover, for me, it's loaded with nostalgia too, because like I said, I knew them both and worked there at the time. Right. So I've just had this cover just like sitting on top of my printer in my museum space for like a year now because I haven't wanted to put it away. Yeah. Tonight I went, I wonder what's in there. So I figured we'd look at what's in here because I don't even know. I just looked at the cover, and it's got. Sonny, the one person I don't know is this woman in the helmet. This woman right here in the light, over here in the light blue helmet.
What makes two of us? Not a clue.
Everybody else is easily recognizable.
I know now. I remember now. She's one of the characters in that Famazon story from Savage Tales.
Ah, okay. And that's and the poster on his door is the dragon. Over here is the Dragon Lady, right under the Milton Caniff's Dragon Lady, because he's such a I want to poster me out of this book frame. Yeah, because he's such a Milton Caniff fan, and Milton Caniff was such an influence on him that he put the Dragon Lady in this cover too. But on the back of Marvel Age 1992 is a calendar. Just a kind of fun calendar by.
Was that a Fred Hembeck calendar?
What was that?
Is that a Fred Hembeck calendar?
No, it's Mike Lackey and Darren Auk.
Oh, okay.
And Darren was in the bullpen at the time. He was a letterer and eventually became. He was the art director there for a couple of years after John Romita retired.
Okay.
So that's always cool to see. It's just got all little jokes on it.
Right.
I guess Mike Lackey, who was an editor there and a writer, wrote the jokes, and Darren drew them. Probably wrote some of them too.
Look. I always like Fred Hembeck's cartoons and Marvel Age.
Oh yeah, I always enjoyed them too. I guess Dale Keown was new at Marvel. World famous Mike Lackey. Yeah, he was in some Street Trash. There was some like famous like I don't know what you'd call it, low budget B horror movie called Street Trash that he was in.
Oh, no.
Had a small role in, and people would always recognize him from that. And it had to be like a real sort of exploitation horror movie underground fan to know Street Trash, the movie.
There's a lot of fans out there like the there's
that was his name when he wrote Beavis and Butthead comic, I believe. Okay. It could have been like I think he called himself that because of Street Trash too. It was kind of a joke.
I was going to say, how famous can you be when your last name is Lackey? So others mistakes.
Mondo Marvel Comics. To celebrate the 30th birthday of the Incredible Hulk, issue 393 will feature a special green foil cover. Oh, that's that comic everybody I see on YouTube all the time.
I think I have one of those.
I never got one. That's the one where the second printing is like a different color foil.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, Street Trash might be on YouTube these days. That's for sure. Oh wow, this is just when that's probably the Hulk cover I see the most on YouTube. Is that I guess it's 393 with like the explosion behind them. It's like the foil is the explosion, and it's got like Bruce Banner turning into the Hulk. Dale Hughes.
She-Hulk cover that had foil on it.
Maybe it's this very drawing, but with the foil.
Maybe.
Right? That's what it is. Something like that. But the Hulk was silhouetted. It's not, yeah.
Tommy, crack me up.
Street Trash.
Oh, the hot potato bobbing game.
Do you know Mike Lackey's role in Street Trash, Tommy? I'm just curious who knows him from it. I didn't even realize there was a Renee Witterstatter's witticisms in the beginning. She must have been editing it at this time.
Gotcha.
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, I met her.
You guys read Marvel Age?
I met her a few times at Heroes Con where she was rapping some of the other artists like
yeah, she reps Golden.
Mike Golden. Yeah.
Arthur Sudum. I forget his. Who else? There's a couple others she reps. So
I think she was working for Topps at one point too.
Yeah, she worked at Topps after Marvel. Oh, and here's some Arthur Adams pencils.
Nice.
Yeah, Street Trash is an early Peter Jackson. I don't know. Yeah, Lackey. Yeah, Lackey was in it. He had some. I don't even know what his role was, but he gets. People would recognize him or would talk to him about that movie. He'd be interviewed about that movie. What is this? Up here's that's a Jim Lee cow of the month. There's a cow drawn by Jim Lee. Because at the time,
okay.
Yeah, you know how women sometimes, have their the animal they like, and they've got stuffed animals of the lot that they've got like I don't know what you'd call it, but I see it happens all the time with it. It becomes sort of their talisman. Like my sister collected elephants because of Dumbo.
Right.
Some girls collect, horses.
Yeah, my mom collected elephants. So
right. I don't know what the name is for that phenomenon. But Marie Javins collected drawings of cows. So when she was an editor there at the time, the artists used to draw cows for her.
Right.
So she'd have a wall. She had a wall full of cows on her office door of drawings from. Because one artist would see it and they'd want to go and draw a cow too. So she'd just have a ton of cow drawings.
It's funny you mentioned that because I've seen people at conventions that will have a sketchbook that has a certain theme to it, and they'll hand it to an artist and they'll look through it and they'll try to outdo everybody else that's drawn in it.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny.
393. was a hard get for me as a kid. I was a big collector of Peter David's run. I lived near Navy Base in Gitmo. Cover gimmicks sold out quickly down there. Yeah. I find it sad that Jim Lee did Wildstorm and not Top Cow. Yeah. And Marie still has all her cow drawings. They might be posted somewhere on the internet.
I like Tommy's comments that I guess Jim Lee had a Top Cow before Mark Silvestri.
Yeah. Well, she must have had a couple dozen cow drawings on her wall. And I guess they made it a feature in Marvel Age for you to give you a little glimpse of what's going on. Great moments in Marvel history. Oh, man, this is how long cover swipes go back. They were collecting all these cover swipes. This is that Avengers number 15. I didn't even realize Avengers number 15 was the first one. And then we've got Avengers Annual 2, X-Men 100, Marvel Triple Action 46, New Warriors 4, and Spectacular Spider-Man 170. The face-off cover, basically.
Well, the Marvel Triple Action is probably a reprint of one of those.
Yeah, I think so. That
Probably, yeah.
Because that's what Marvel Triple Action was, the Avengers reprint title.
Okay, who wants to take the Marvel trivia quiz?
I guess I can.
They should have had her write a Hell Cow series, yeah. Marvel Age is so much more fun to look through than DC Bulletin. Marvel Age was supposed to be fun, so.
Right.
Okay. The touch-up art team that John Romita heads is colloquially known as Damage Control, Romita's Raiders, Romita's Redskins, or Romita's Rednecks.
It's Romita's Raiders.
That's Romita's Raiders.
Yeah.
I know that one without looking at the answer. Okay. I guess this is an all John Romita quiz. John's work as art director sometimes goes hand in hand with the work of his wife Virginia as Marvel's. Oh, come on. There's no way you're going to know Virginia's title. But anyway, it was traffic coordinator, which is why she's on the cover here asking John for when's that Marvel cover due? Because the traffic coordinator was the one who figured out schedules. Besides being in charge of the production bullpen, she figured out all the schedules for all the comics and when they were going to print. So, and she actually had a lot, people listened to her. When you got Virginia mad at me, because if you missed your schedule and missed the printing schedule, you cost Marvel money.
Right.
So that schedule was sacrosanct, which is why in the 70s they had all those special fill-in reprint issues. Mm-hmm. Because if you missed that, you had to put something in there or you were going to lose money.
Right. Well,
some early issues of Marvel Age, and time has not been kind to the printing. Yeah, sorry. These are really this on newsprint.
To comment on what when Jim Steranko did the Comic Scene Media Scene magazines, those things are on paper like a newspaper, but they're semi-glossy. They're not kind of matte finish. Whatever paper stock he used still holds up 40 some years later. It's still pristine white today.
Wow. Yeah. John Romita reached an even wider audience than comics would permit through his work on. Once I give you the answers, you'll know what it is.
You don't get multiple choice here?
Yeah, you do, but once I give it, it's easy with the multiple choice. The Merry Marching Society, Desert Storm Campaign, Marvel Plastic Pillows, or the Spider-Man newspaper strip.
The Spider-Man newspaper strip.
Yeah, it's obvious once you.
Didn't Dan Sakai letter that one? The newspaper strip?
I don't remember.
I just wondered. I think he did.
I do not have a soft spot for inventory stories. When I was buying them and there was an inventory, it was so disappointing. It was a reprint. Even before inventory stories, there were reprints, and they were just like, ha ha ha.
Yeah, when it comes to foreign reprints, when they were anthologies, you could tell that this is an inventory story.
Right.
Because it was the ones where the character was standing on a rooftop thinking about life.
Right. John is primarily known for drawing superheroes, of course, but he also drew a tale that introduced. Here's another easy one for us once we get the questions. Goose Rider, Rocket Raccoon, the Manphibian, or Satana? Satana was his.
That's what I
don't know. Aunt of Horror number 4.
Is the Manphibian a real character, or is that one of those parody characters?
He appeared in
Goose Rider
that Legion of Monsters one-shot, and it was drawn by Dave Cockrum.
Ah, okay.
He kind of looks like Chad from the Starjammers, but even more biffed up.
Okay. John's Captain America work included a turning point story in which Steve Rogers decided to enter a new field of work as, I remember this one, policeman, politician, comic book artist, or heart-lung machine repairman.
That was policeman. The comic artist was later. It was during the Grunwald run.
Yeah, I don't think he was that. And I'm thinking he's not actually a comic book. He was like a commercial artist rather than a comic book
but
artist.
he became a cop during sometime before the.
Yeah, that's right. See, that one was a little tricky. Arc. Yeah. John's portfolio of exemplary covers includes, among many others, the first issue of Luke Cage, Hero for Hire, Dracula Lives, Giant Size X-Men, or Guns and Ammo. Well, it's not Guns and Ammo.
No.
Giant Size X-Men is Gil Kane, right?
Yeah, it's Luke Cage.
Dracula Lives is Neil Adams. So he must have done Luke Cage, Hero for Hire, #1.
It did. It's clearly his artwork.
Yeah.
You don't even have to look it up on the Grand Comics database.
Stewie and Louie, how you doing? Comic artist? No, we're oh no, that was the end. Comic artist was later on. That's right. Fooled me because he became a commercial artist. Thought the reprints was a new page that basically boils down the characters. Oh, that's right. When they would do the framing devices over the reprint.
Right.
Mm-hmm. They did a Marvel Comics game where they did an issue of Cap drawn by Cap, which was Romita, I think. Oh, wow. Yeah, I remember in the 80s he became a commercial artist. So did he become a comic artist in the 90s?
He became a comic artist in the 80s. It was around 85 or 80. It was around the introduction of the Serpent Society, just before he broke up with Bernie Rosenthal.
Okay.
He started working for Marvel.
All right. I didn't realize he was. I remember him being a commercial artist, but the specific comic artist thing passed me. The Byrne issues, I think that happened.
No, but
right?
I think what Sanctuary of Reality is talking about. There was that line of one shots one year called Marvel's Comics, which were supposed to be Marvel comics made inside the Marvel universe, and the Captain America story was supposed to be the return of fan favorite Steve Rogers to drawing the comic, but he had a problem with deadline, so they had to get somebody else to finish with one half of the book because it starts with Sal Buscema artwork. Okay. Then it switches to Mark Bagley, I think.
Huh. As the first artist to draw the Fantastic Four after Jack Kirby's departure, Romita's first assignment was a tale leaving the FF in the middle between the Mad Thinker and the Puppet Master, Galactus and the Silver Surfer, Namor and Magneto, or Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas. There's a timely joke for you.
I actually like that last one.
Funny. I don't know what his first story was. I would guess Mad Thinker and the Puppet Master.
I'm thinking Namor and what was the other one?
Magneto? I don't know.
That's a complete guess.
That's like 104? Because Kirby left at 103, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't think I ever read that issue. One of the classic Romita Spider-Man stories introduced... Well, they must have the answers here. Maybe I should look at them, huh? Where do they have the answers? Where's the answer key, mister?
You don't have them down at the bottom where you have to turn the book upside down to read it?
No, they don't. And you would think it would continue on the next page, but it doesn't seem
maybe
to.
the last page.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Wherever they have the editorial.
There's a checklist. Answers. They're on the second to last page. Let's see. 7 is C. Namor and Magneto. You got it, Scott.
That was a complete guess.
Matter of fact, who's Hey, my name's in here. I didn't realize that. If you look in production, my name is in these little bitty letters over here. Jared Osborne. I didn't even realize my name was in here. When you're in the production, you didn't get your name in many things. So.
Right.
John's tenure. Oh, no, here we go. One of the classic Romita Spider-Man stories introduced the Kingpin's son, who battled his father under the guise of...
Remember
the
that?
schemer.
Yeah, there we go. B, the schemer.
You're
That was
scared.
one of the dumbest names ever.
I knew that happened, but I couldn't remember his name off the top of my head. The schemer. John's
Became the
tenure.
Rose in the 80s.
John's tenure
He was
on
Supreme
Amazing-
Hydra.
What was that?
He was Supreme
What was
Hydra in a Richard Fisk. He was Supreme Hydra in 2 issues of Captain America.
Yeah, he got the Rose, and then whoops, he was the scheme. The Rose was the Supreme Hydra.
Yeah, he became the Rose in the 80s. Nobody was supposed to know that it was Richard Fisk, but it was kind of an open secret.
Well, kind of like
John's
a
tenure.
wrestler in wrestling. Yeah.
What was that?
Kind of like a masked wrestler in wrestling.
There you go.
We don't know who he is. Everybody knows who he is. Come on.
He's the guy who's missing from the lineup. John's tenure on Amazing Spider-Man allowed him to team the web slinger with a number of vivid guest stars. Which one of them encountered Spidey first during Romita's run? Iceman, Medusa, Kazar, or Forbush Man? That would be Medusa, right?
It ain't Forbush, man.
Because he created Medusa. Medusa first appeared in that Spider-Man with that great cover of her tying Spider-Man up with his hair, right?
No, she appeared in Fantastic Four.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which one of the? Oh, well, I guess it was. I guess the question is, did Iceman show up in? Did he ever show up in Romita's run? I don't think so.
I don't think
Nor
so.
did Kazar. Let's
He
check the
appeared in
answers.
Marvel Team Up.
C. Kazar.
I have a whole bunch of Marvel team ups, but boy, I haven't read them in 30 some years.
Yeah, Kazar appeared in Spider-Man.
Kazar made a bunch of appearances. You remember that Kazar book from the first Kazar volume? It features only reprints, and there are 1 or 2 reprints from Amazing Spider-Man. First, he appears in X-Men, then he appears in Daredevil, then he appears in Amazing Spider-Man.
Oh, I don't remember him appearing in Spider-Man for some reason. And Jared worked there. Yeah, there's some evidence of me working there and there. I remember the Schemer issue from Digest reprints. Oh, yeah. I think I had the pocket books of the Ditko stuff. That was good stuff. But I don't think I had much Romita stuff in those ones. John won the Spider-Man penciling assignment when Stan Lee and Steve Ditko parted ways over. Now, this isn't true, I bet. A, the use of communist villains. B, the secret identity of Green Goblin. C, the appearance of Mary Jane Watson. Or D, the old lest filling tastes great debate. The myth was always the secret identity of the Green Goblin, but that's not true. Ditko has said that's not true many times. He left Amazing Spider-Man because he didn't get his promised royalties, and Stan Lee stopped talking to him.
Wonderful.
He has written that. 10B, the secret identity. That Steve Ditko has even pointed out that he planted Norman Osborn in some of J. Jones Jameson's parties and such, so that he wouldn't be totally out of the blue.
Right. Tommy brings up a good point where he says it's Kazar. Some people say Kazar. The way to find out is however Tim pronounces it. It's the
That's the wrong way. Yeah. I used to say Kazar as a kid. Then I found out it was Kazar, so I pronounced it Kazar ever since.
Kazar.
Kazar, strong like
when I first heard it.
Yeah, I used to say Kazar. I remember that as a kid.
Interesting.
After years of drawing romance comics, Stan asked John to return to Marvel to draw A, Daredevil, B, Doctor Strange, C, the Human Torch, or D, the Bullpen Bulletins page.
Daredevil.
I'm going to say Daredevil.
It was Daredevil, and that's where he first drew Spider-Man too. And they always say it was like a tryout for. Mm-hmm. As he described in John Romita interview published in Foom magazine, John and Stan first met A, on the Statue of Liberty, B, in the Empire State Building, C, at Bob Kane's house, or D, on a blind date. I got to go with Bob Kane's house by it's just process of elimination. I mean, I don't know if that's right or not, but that's B, in the Empire State Building. 12B, right? So they first met in the Empire State Building. Did Marvel used to have offices there?
I have no idea.
I don't think so. I don't remember.
Clue.
The Coming of Kazar from Amazing Fantasy 50 said, "Oh, okay, that's where it was." Yeah, I don't know how I don't remember Kazar and Spider-Man. Had a Marvel Tales that reprinted Kazar and also May and Ben Parker raising a mermaid story.
That's interesting. I may have to look it up.
There were a lot of Cummings in the 60s. Take that as you will. The Coming of Kazar. Let's see. We're done with our quiz. Then there's a John Romita interview. We won't read that right now.
Might take a while.
Yeah. They give us... I always liked his design for the Prowler. They give you some old John Romita sketches. I never thought the Prowler was very interesting, but his costume was cool. Some early Punisher sketches from John. In his duties as art director, I assume. Oh, here's an article on Romita's Raiders, who we learned the name of. These are the guys who did art corrections.
Gotcha.
And who one time got Rob Liefeld very mad. Because I thought Jared said Bob Crane's house. No. Might get murdered there.
Bob
or at least
Crane,
end up in a
do you guys know much about the history of Bob Crane?
Vaguely, I know that he was
interesting stuff he was involved in. Very, very odd individual.
Yep. 13 John designed the look of the... Wow. I didn't know that. Yeah, like I said, this is Romita. I'll tell you the story about Romita's Raiders getting Rob Liefeld mad in the early 90s sometimes because their whole job was to fix mistakes. They were apprenticing under John Romita, who was the art director. And their whole job was, like, if there was something wrong in the comic, an obvious error or maybe an error in the costume, they would fix it under John's direction.
Right.
The problem was Rob Liefeld's books were full of mistakes. I mean,
imagine that.
Peter David in his column wrote when he said that Rob Liefeld is the Ed Wood of comics, he just doesn't care that the.
Oh, I remember specifically Peter wrote a little piece about Rob drew the like the button layout on a touch-tone phone, and he got it wrong.
Yeah,
how do you get that wrong?
He just didn't care that the tombstone fell over in the middle of the scene. He wasn't interested in that. he didn't mind when his inkers fixed things, like because Bob Wyacek inked them, and he would. Yeah, we're talking about Rob's Marvel stuff. I'm talking about from the early '90s, and from probably from like '90 or '91, that early, from before the probably like 1990 even. So what would happen was there was so much stuff go in there. The Raiders didn't know what to fix and what not to fix, because his perspective was always off. He drew hand. Like a lot of times, like the inkers would fix little, like if the hand wasn't drawn well, they'd fix the hand up, and he didn't mind that at all. Rob was all 100% okay with his inker fixing up stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But one day, I guess the Raiders and just got tired of fixing all his mistakes, so they took an entire issue and fixed everything in one issue. They just like fixed all his perspective, fixed everything that was wonky in the issue. They almost redrew the whole issue, and that pissed him off to no end, which I can understand. But but that was the time he got really mad that they fixed everything that he did wrong, because like that wasn't stuff he wasn't interested in, those kind of details, and it didn't hold him back not to. I mean, he was as popular as anyone with all those mistakes in it, so why should he care?
Yeah, even when he had two left hands, doesn't matter.
Right, as long as it was exciting and fun, that's what he was going for.
He balanced out the two left hands with no feet at all. So.
Oh yeah. Well, like I said, people make fun of Rob Liefeld for not drawing feet, and he always tries to defend himself on Twitter or whatever. But lots of artists would avoid drawing feet. He just made it obvious. Carl Kestis only drew much as but like I said, he didn't really mind if his inkers redrew stuff. But when the Raiders redrew an entire issue.
Who I think didn't like to draw feet? Gil Kane. Because Gil Kane's Barbarians had very good quality boots.
Yep.
And I imagine that he didn't like to draw toes.
Yeah, drawing toes is not. Listen, no superhero artist especially wants to draw feet, because first of all, it's tough to find a shot where you get, because most you rarely are drawing a full figure. You're usually drawing from the waist up. So the feet are always getting cut off anyway. But what Rob would do was they'd be in like I remember in Heroes Reborn, like it's in Captain America or something. They'd be in like Avengers Mansion, and there'd be smoke down the bottom of the panel. So like their feet would taper off into this smoke, and you'd be like, why is there smoke in the middle of the room? But like I said, all artists didn't want to draw feet in general, but he made it obvious, which is why he got tagged with it. Let's see what's in the next page. After Romita's Raiders, we get Fred Hembeck salutes the spiderific art of Jazzy John Romita. So now we get a Fred Hembeck tribute to John Romita. Did they collect? They either just collected all Hembeck stuff from Marvel Age, or they're gonna do it. I remember reading that.
I have some Hembeck compilation volumes. I have one that's called the Essential Omnibus.
Yeah.
I don't know if all his Marvel Age stuff is in there or not. I haven't looked through it in a long time.
There's an omnibus. There's an omnibus of his Ba Hembeck stuff, of his Hembeck magazine.
Yeah, I have those too.
You know that.
I actually have all the original Fanico magazines that he did for that series.
I have a lot of. It was maybe 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. I hadn't had those Hembecks out. I haven't read them since the 80s. And I was like, you know what? I want to try reading these again. I couldn't handle the lettering.
I don't mind the lettering. It's just he does get a little loquacious at times. He'll go on a ramble about something.
There were so many little letters jammed in. And I remember this. It didn't bother me at all when I was reading them first, when I was 16, 18, whenever I first read them. I didn't even notice it.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
This time around, I was like, oh, I can't. I had to stop reading it. I couldn't do it. I'm like, wow, if they re-lettered this, it would be cool.
Yeah.
Remember, Eric Larson said hardly anybody in the world drives a car because he hates destroying automobiles. Yeah, there's stuff like that. Friar Tuck isn't a Hembeck fan.
What? Get out of here, man. Hembeck's awesome.
Well, I'll have to tell you my not Fred Hembeck story.
Okay.
My friend Ed, who I've mentioned before, who I went to college with and also worked at Marvel with, and he's also an artist. This is like 20 years ago. The internet was still fairly new. It wasn't like there was no social media yet.
Right.
And Ed's been a freelance artist all his life. He teaches. He also does all sorts of art gigs and this and that. And it was one day, and he also, like, this is before social media. He was never that big a computer guy to begin with. He uses computers, but he's not like a natural at it. So one day he was there was some bulletin board for teachers or something, or for some gigs he was working. So he goes on the bulletin board, and somebody's flaming him on the bulletin board. This guy is the worst. He's terrible. He's awful. I don't like his stuff. And signed it Fred Hembeck. So Ed sees this, and his then wife sees it too. Get all worked up. Oh my goodness!
Sure.
And so they find Fred Hembeck's email address and write this nasty letter to Fred Hembeck.
I can just
and send it off to him. Now, Ed's telling me this story like a week later, and the first words out of my mouth were, Ed, you know that's not Fred Hembeck. And he's like, well, I know that now. So poor Fred Hembeck's sitting at home, minding his own business, gets this letter from an email from a complete stranger, being angry at Fred for making fun of Ed's work.
Yeah.
So Ed had to write him back and apologize. I hated his feelings on Spider-Ham as a kid, and those squiggly knees drove me nuts. Grew to love him after meeting him destroying the Marvel U. Fred Hembeck, sorry, Scott, I 90% see eye to eye with your opinion, but going to agree to disagree on him. If you were... the reason Fred Hembeck is so dear to the hearts of a lot of people my age and Scott's age is he was the only thing out there. I mean, nowadays when there's 1,000 blogs dedicated to comics,
right?
It's easy to dismiss. Fred Hembeck in 1980 was the only one doing that sort of humorous analysis of comics at all.
Oh, also when Fred would get on the subject that he was, in love with, like if you talk about Nets, for example, you'd get, it would be fun just to see how worked up he would get about something he enjoyed. And
it'd be fun to get all the historical information. He's what got me interested in 60s Jimmy Olsen comics. His love for 60s Jimmy Olsen comics.
Yeah,
he used to tell you the story that was going on. And there's nothing like it out there.
Right.
Nowadays, everything is... I mean, I'm not even that terribly interested in Fred Hembeck anymore. But in the late 70s, early 80s, yeah, like I said, great to him. Anybody who's... probably anybody who's in their 40s or 50s is a big Fred Hembeck because he was the only thing like it. Matter of fact, I got a...
he draws better than Rob Liefeld.
I have a Fred Hembeck
impression. I always had the impression that those squiggles in the knees were Hembeck making fun a little of Jack Kirby. That was his way of drawing Kirby lines.
That was just Fred's shtick,
Here we go. I've got a Fred Hembeck AIM agent.
I have I have a Fred Hembeck card like that of Ray Bradbury.
You can buy these on Amazon. I think
Yeah,
this is a genuine Fred Hembeck sketch card, an AIM agent, one of one, 2013.
Jim has one too. I don't remember which one he has. It may be Space Ghost, but
yeah, he sends it for the $10, $20 depending.
or less.
AIM agent was on the cheaper end.
Right.
Good for he did self-rented meta comic strips before they became a dime a dozen on any current website. Yeah, he was there was nothing like it at the time. That's why, like I said, everybody around my age loves Fred Hembeck stuff because it was the only thing. It was the only thing you could read that loved comics as much as we did. Even like comic books, even like Amazing Heroes and the Comics Journal and all that stuff was shilling to some extent.
It was like the exact opposite of a Comics Journal article.
Yes, it was.
But he was addressing the subject matter, but he actually liked it.
Yeah. And also every other, especially at the time, like late 70s, early 80s, every comic publication wanted comic books to be taken seriously. And you can understand that because at the time they weren't. They never had been. So they were very much into comic books being taken seriously, as we do now. Today, we can talk about comic books seriously. But Fred Hembeck loved them, but didn't always take them seriously. And there was nothing like that out there.
Of course, there's also the notion that if you're doing humor, it's not supposed to be serious, which is completely wrong because humor comics are probably the best way that comics get to a general audience.
Mm-hmm.
I have a Mordillo book around here somewhere. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Mordillo. He was an Argentinian cartoonist who lived in France, and he used to do newspaper one-panel gags or three-panel gags, no text because he couldn't write French very well. But they usually had giraffes, and all of the people he drew, they kind of looked like they were made of pillows. But it was the body language that made it interesting. So yeah, it's obviously supposed to be a humor cartoon, but it's got a certain life of its own. So the idea that you can't have fun doing comics it's that perception that the United States is trying to get out of, but they're going about it the wrong way.
Yeah. Fred Hembeck. Then we have, I don't know what this article is. Marvel Collector's Items class. I guess it's about the pickup art of John Romita's because they have I guess this is the art that they used for that they used for licensing stuff. Like they'd pick up that Spider-Man cover.
Right.
What do you got? A guy right beneath Hembeck at the time in that similar milieu. Matt Fiesel came in a lot later for me than Fred. Like Fred Hembeck for me was like the late 70s, and then Matt Fiesel was the mid 80s. So, Cynical Man.
Okay.
And he did Zot 10.5.
Yeah.
I liked Matt Fiesel's stuff.
Gotcha.
Somewhere I still have my little trade of Cynical Man that I got in 1987. Ooh, a behind-the-scenes look at Nomad. Got to get those current Marvel comics up there and selling. Nomad. Has the number one of Nomad gone up in price yet?
I was impressed at the time with that guy who drew the first 3 issues, Clark Hawbaker. But then it disappeared and Pat Olive became the main artist, which wasn't bad, but it was a totally different style.
Yeah, this isn't the greatest style right here. Pretty
No, but I like the action in it.
Okay. The action's not bad. The drawing itself, But a lot of guys were doing this at this time. Pick up Nomad number 1 when it wanders into your local comic shop. And we got at the end, Mark's Remarks. I guess we get a little. I guess Mark Grunwald had a regular column, so he's giving us his remarks. What do we end up with here? Oh, is this all Mark's remarks? Oh, this is a how to break into comics article. And Mark's got 22 points on how to break into comics. Woo.
Interesting. Didn't Wally Wood's 22 panels that always work have 22?
Right. Oh, I think this guy actually sent some pages in too that Mark is critiquing. That's interesting. Yeah, so I guess this is Michael Pickens, Newark, Ohio, sent some pages in and Mark is critiquing them. All right.
I don't think you like the critique because that name does not ring a bell.
Right.
No. I hear some people in the bullpen. They put out assistant editor cards for real that year, I think. Gotcha. And I guess they made some matter of fact, the guy I just told you a story about with Fred Hembeck, my friend Ed Meyer, he's got a card right down there. But I can still hear him saying it. I was like, that's not Fred Hembeck. I know that now. Jared, I was flipping through an old previews this morning and saw a listing for your comic under Red Menace comic. Oh yes, my friends and I we published our own in the 97, 98, the worst time to self-publish a comic to do. Oh my God. We published our own comic, 4 issues of Kansas Thunder, which was our anthology, and then 2 issues of Delia Charm I published, which continued my own story. Matter of fact, I can run out in the garage and show them to you. You guys talk amongst yourselves for a minute. I'll get some copies.
I have a whole closet full of old previews that are just sitting there gathering dust now, and I haven't looked at them in a long time. I have a bunch, probably over 100 of them, I would guess. Tommy said there's a couple episodes of a local cable access show that Mark Grunwald hosted on YouTube. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it or not, but there's also a really good Canadian TV show that was done by Mark Asquith that's on YouTube now. It's called Prisoners of Gravity. And they have a lot of interviews with some well-known creators. It's really worth watching and tracking down.
Let's see. What do we got here?
Tales from the Garage.
Tales from the... Boy, they're cold.
Yeah.
Let me zoom in and I'll show you. These I did in 1997. This was the first issue. That was my story, Charms Books. Then The Romantics was the story my friend Ed did that I wrote. And I also started out writing John's story, which was The Fetid People, this gory vampire story.
Yeah.
There's The Romantics, who were some of the first people in space. Then let's see, issue 3, that's The Fetid People. That's more... Then my friend Pat did his story too. The Problem with Marshall, is that the name of it? I can't even remember now. Yeah, The Big Problem with Marshall. There's issue 4. That was my last one. And then I did 2 issues. I think this is 98. I continued my story. I don't have a year in here. What am I, crazy? Someone's going to steal this from me. Delia Charm. But this is black and white comics from the late 90s. But oh my god, it was besides the fact that comics, indie comics never exactly sell great to begin with. This was during the Marvel bankruptcy period when comics were kind of at their nadir and crashed. We did Oh, I can remember we did a convention in Pittsburgh. We did a few conventions, some in New York. We did Small Press Expo. We did one in Pittsburgh. And it's like people just weren't interested in comics. It was crazy.
This been around 93 or so?
No, 97. 97, 98. This is after Marvel's bankruptcy was like 96. So by 97, 98, it's like nobody was interested in comics. So it was crazy. It was possibly the worst time to put out an indie comic, but it was the time we had, so we did it.
Right.
Red Menace Comics is here on the Grand Comics database. Somebody indexed the Delia Charm one shot and Kansas Thunder #1, and they added the cover to #2. And there's skeleton information on the 3, but they don't know there was a #4.
Okay, I never even looked for them on there. But I've got tons of copies of them.
You can index them. You can just have them.
Yeah.
It's a bit cumbersome.
Yeah, you just need to do some new art and print it up and on a chromium cover and just staple it.
One of the things, the funny
you do 25 variants, and you do a 1 in 500 variant. So you can sell some.
Let me tell you this story about the Pittsburgh con. I think it must have been 97. We were doing a con in Pittsburgh. And like I said, nobody was selling anything. Nobody, there's a bunch of us there, artists and whatever. And people would walk by your booth with their heads down. I mean, it was crazy how except for one table. There was right across the aisle from mine was this guy and his girlfriend and maybe a couple other girls. And the guy had one, I can't remember what comic it was. It was funny. It was something along the lines of Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, only not that. I think like Johnny the Homicidal Maniac was hot. Mm-hmm. And this guy did sort of his own, in that sort of same genre of, and I've never even read Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. I just know it from that guy.
Yeah.
But he wasn't, for some reason, but he was like the big fish in a small pond here in the indie way. And it's like people were trying to get him to draw other comics like that. And he refused. He's like, no, I don't want to. I don't want. So like he was the only one, he was getting a little attention. But his girlfriend, who was running the booth, they called themselves the Three-Legged Black Cat Society. And they were just selling mini comics. They were just selling their own mini comics and stuff. Mm-hmm. Which this guy was attached to. He was over the booth sometimes. It was mostly his girlfriend, who was a real nice person.
Right.
And it's like all the Marvel people who there were some lower tier Marvel people around there too, who also weren't selling anything. Mm. She was selling stuff like crazy. And she had mini comics, but sometimes they would have mini, which were all done on Xerox paper. But sometimes she'd have like Xerox paper that had like a hologram on it, hologram paper. And she'd use that as the cover. And there were women and girls were buying her stuff like crazy. And one time I'm over there talking to her, and she said to me, listen, if you learn one thing from this convention, it's that women like shiny things. And I was like, she was the only one selling anything, and it was all these shiny covers. It was just like, wow. I was like, I learned that ever since then. So you joke when you say put a chromium cover on it, but
yeah, that's true. I was joking. So
yeah, but she said, if you learn one thing, women like shiny things. I was like, oh, okay. Did Nomad have something to do with Captain America? Yes. When Captain America, due to Watergate, when Captain America lost his faith in America, he became Nomad. And that's what, but there was a Nomad. First they introduced Nomad as the Secret Empire story by Englehart and Sal Buscema, right?
Don't know. And
first they introduced Nomad, who was just this minor character in the Captain America book. Then they had Captain America find out that basically Nixon was the head of the Serpent Society. And that's so Captain America lost his faith in the country and decided to give up being Captain America and became Nomad. And the kid was like, it was like a 16-year-old who was Nomad, became Captain America for a little while. Yeah. I was more of a DC and Valiant guy. I was an indie guy in the 90s, so I just worked at Marvel. Yeah. There's a couple of episodes locally on the show Mark Grunwald hosted on YouTube. I'll have to look those up. He shows up in that MTV one that I posted. What do you want to trade, Scott? Are those previews?
The preview ones are the easy ones. It's the old Capital City catalogs, the ones that are really
180 and became Nomad. Yeah, lasted 3 more issues. He did an incredible shtick with the cape and gave up being Nomad. Yeah. Loved the show. Okay.
Yeah, we talked about prison.
Look great, Jared. I still have a stockpile of them, Comic Crack. You can find those books in my garage. If you want to, I'll have to set up where you can PayPal me for postage, and I'll mail them out to you. I got to say, Kansas Thunder looks leagues better and more professional. Some people are trying to push on the Indiegogo. Yeah, I'm better than I was then, but yeah, I think the general we were talking about this last night. It is so easy to publish a comics nowadays that it's like punk rock. Yeah. It was so easy to form a band that there people talk about their love for punk rock, but there's a lot of bad punk rock. The premise of Kansas Thunder is that's just something that's loud. Kansas Thunder is the loudest thing. So it was just an anthology book, and there was 4 stories in it. There was my story, which is kind of a slice of life story about Delia Charm, who ends up kind of being a detective when she starts going to vampire clubs and discovering that there's some crazy person out there who's killing the vampire kids because he thinks they're real vampires. Then there's the Romantics, which my friend Ed did, which I wrote some of, which is about the first people into space who are Russians and had a seat of their pants. They're a family. Their name is the Romantics. They had a seat of the pants space program, and it's just kind of like space opera out there, little 8-page stories about them trying out new worlds. And then there's the Fetid People, which my friend John drew, which is just him loving horror and nasty vampire stuff. Then there's The Big Problem with Marshall, which is a humor strip about this guy named Marshall who's got big problems. My friend Pat did. And like I said, then I continued with 2 issues of Delia Charm, which kind of continued her story a little bit. Yeah, it might be coming out in a Epic collection.
What would be funny if somebody did a reprint version of the Watergate era stuff was to have a section in the middle where they had 18 and a half missing pages.
Wow.
Nobody got that.
Wow. And my friend Ed distributed more of these than Diamond. Because he used them to get work as his calling card because he was a freelance artist. He used to do all sorts of weird advertising gigs and caricature gigs and whatever gigs he could get. And he'd hand these out like, oh yeah, here's some of that. And people loved to get comics.
Right.
So, like I said, he handed out more copies than that's why I have them all packaged up in these there's like one Silver Age bag that has all 6 issues. So he could just hand these to people because he that's what he did. I saw an enter for Chocolate Thunder in a preview 2 years ago after your listing. It's not about a stripper though. Okay.
Yeah, I think I remember that one. But I can't remember what it was about, but I think I remember seeing Chocolate Thunder, and it had nothing to do with strippers.
It was about Daryl Dawkins.
Wow, I haven't pulled these out in a long time. That was a fun walk down memory lane.
Well, there was a indie comic back in the 90s. It was called Memory Lanes.
Don't remember that at all.
I think Peter Gross wrote it. It was like a D&D party that appeared in the middle of a bowling alley.
Nixon was a wellspring of inspiration. Steve Englehart. Yeah, Steve used Nixon again. And I don't know. I don't think I ever read those Doctor Strange issues, but I had maybe half of the Serpent Society stuff as a kid, so I was very familiar with it. Yeah.
Somebody got it.
Missing 18 and a half. So who wants to see what comics I got this week?
Let's do it.
I got a lot of stuff I'm not even going to read. How, the collector's bug hit me.
Uh-oh.
I got a facsimile of issue of Spider-Man 101 after having just like last year bought the True Believers edition of Spider-Man 101.
No.
And it's not even that good. Not even one of the better Spider-Man stories, I don't think. So it's like, I just like it because it's a facsimile edition. I'll put it in with my other reprints and it'll sit there. So it's kind of like, until I want to pull it out and look at. Ooh, Steranko posters. Only we could get those.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's one of the fun things about looking through old magazines and fanzines and things, discovering all this stuff that you can't get anymore. And back in the day, it was dirt cheap compared to what you paid for.
Mm-hmm. Then the other reprints I got, once again, I doubt I'll even read these. They're almost totally for collection purposes. Graphic Fantasy #1, which is a $10 facsimile edition. This is where Savage Dragon first appeared.
Okay, that's not what I thought.
Eric Larson, I think he was either in high school or right out of high school. And these are impossible to get. The originals of Paul Dragon, yeah, is in these ones.
Yeah, there was another prozine that was published back in the probably early 70s. It was called Graphic Showcase. That's one I was thinking.
And this is this is 72 pages too, so there's a lot of stuff in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he tracked down everyone to get the rights to do this, because that's why he always said he wasn't reprinting these, because there was tons of other people's work in it.
Right.
So issue 1 was $10, and issue 2, which is a little bit smaller, was $6. Completely different logo. And he reprinted his part of this like recently in Savage Dragon 250. He colored it and put it in Savage Dragon 250. So I've read the story. So it's like it's like these are just going on the shelf for no reason except we collectors collect things. So I got a Spider-Man pure collectors collect things facsimile and 2 Savage Dragon pure collectors collect things. And I don't do that often. But it certainly drove up the price of my weekly pull.
Sure.
Then here's another weird one. Cerebus in Hell 2021 preview. I guess he gives you a preview of all the covers for Cerebus in Hell for this year. Then it's a calendar where I guess each month ties in with the Cerebus in Hell comic that's coming out and the concept. So you get the comic strip to read and more jokes here in your calendar. Sort of like that Marvel calendar on the back of the Marvel Age. You get jokes in your calendar and a Cerebus strip.
I just had a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to do a preview comic. And one of the characters that appears in the preview will be called First Appearance. And then you have to wait for the first appearance of First Appearance. But the speculators will sell the preview as the first appearance of First Appearance.
First Appearance.
Mm-hmm. And then you can retcon the whole thing later and just call it Appearances Can Be Deceiving.
That can be... That's his new name. Let's see. Then I got 3 comics I actually read. Well, I did read the Cerebus in Hell, but 3 comics I actually read. Psychodrama Illustrated, another Beto Hernandez comic, which was good. This is the 4th and final issue. but an expensive series at $5 a piece. I mean, I love Beto, but I think this was one of his movies. Sometimes it's hard to tell, except that Fritz shows up not as Fritz in the end, and she was in the beginning too, because he was doing some graphic novels a few years ago. That have you guys read a lot of Beto's stuff?
No, I haven't.
Well, he did, his main one is called Luba, which is about, and it really could have been called that. A matter of fact, I read that for the whole thing in a row. I took it out of the library like last winter. It's a big, thick book like that connects all his Luba stories.
Yeah,
which is about Luba is the name of the one sister, and it really could be named after any of them because they're all in it just as much. But I guess she was the first one created. So, but one of the sisters is Fritz, right? Who's an actress. And she's like a Mexican actress, and she's been like softcore porn too. And she's like famous in Mexico. She's the one with the really big chest. And sometimes he does graphic novels of the B movies she's in, or at least he used to. Now I think he's doing miniseries of the movies. So I think this psychodrama illustrate, and his main stuff that he does in Love and Rockets is called Palomar.
Right.
Luba takes place in Palomar. Palomar is the small Mexican town where all his characters come and go from.
Right.
Fritz is one of the. So it's like the Fritz. It's like sometimes you pick it up and you're like, oh, who are all these characters? Because he's got a huge cast of characters. So it's like, oh, is this one Palomar or is this one a movie? I think it's a movie.
Gotcha.
By what's going on in it. So it's like weird sometimes when you're reading. When they came out, just like I have like 3 or 4 of them that came out like in the early 2000s, just as graphic novels. They were never comics, and they even said in them, starring Fritz. These are the so you knew that they were the movies. I think this is the movie, but I'm not 100% sure.
Gotcha.
Iron Hawk, such a litigious logo. Spider-Man 1 was Marvel dipping its toe back into the traditional monster waters after the coup loosened. Yeah. Though he was a living vampire, though. He wasn't a vampire, so they weren't quite all the way in there.
Oh, and do you remember him in the 90s cartoon? Where he couldn't bite people, so he had things in his hand to suck blood directly from the skin. But instead of saying blood, he said plasma.
Usagi Yojimbo for me. That's an easy one. But Savage Dragon is up there too now.
Well, what I'm curious about when he says you guys have a run of, you're talking about like a complete run or just partial or what?
What's a run? What's a long run? Doesn't matter if it's complete, partial, whatever. I have all the issues of Savage Dragon now, but I started at 70 and bought issues 1 through 69 cheap when I started buying it finally.
You have a complete Gru, so probably that one.
Yeah. I used to have every issue of Gru. I don't think I do anymore. But I have every issue of Usagi Yojimbo, so that's a lot of issues.
I don't have every issue of Usagi Yojimbo. I have a lot of them, but I don't have...
Uba stories are a great
read. I have a lot of Conans, too.
Yeah, Beto does appear to be about 3 times more prolific than Jaime. Definitely. That's why he's got his own... That's why he's got stuff outside Love and Rockets. Gotcha. Plasma. Yeah, I have some... I had a long run of The Walking Dead. I bought from, though I sold the early issues now. I had from 3 till it ended. Now I have from 50 till it ended.
I have a long run of the Fantagraphics Prince Valiant hardcovers.
How about Paolo? Well, he's in Portugal. They don't have runs in Portugal.
No, I kind of have I think I have the entire Music Paris Avengers. All the way until Bendis starts, then we get a new number 1.
It's like as a kid, my long runs were the Hulk, X-Men.
Oh.
I bought like everything Marvel from like 75 to 82. Those were all my long runs of Marvel.
I also have a complete run of the first Micronaut series.
Mine are in Paris, I think. I just got rid of them like last year. I had
didn't
like
have
all
to buy
my
runs. The good thing about about having anthologies is if I could basically buy a different comic every month, and I'd get 3 or 4 characters anyway.
Yeah, boy, I have a ton of Dark Horse Presents too.
Oh yeah, I have a complete set of Dark Horse Presents, volumes 1, 2, and 3. So that's a long run. I sometimes forget my long runs because it's tough to remember when they're each.
Yeah.
I have a long run of Cerebus. I don't even know how long it is.
Got a heck of a lot of Hellboy.
You don't have any Hellboy.
A lot of Hellboy. What else?
And there's a couple of series where I have the entire run of trade paperbacks.
Okay.
Like Scalped.
Oh, Concrete. I have a lot. Just about.
I have all of Concrete, however long that is. They don't have runs in Portugal. That sounds weird if you don't have the context.
Well,
no, we don't. We have very good quality water. We have very good quality tap water.
I'm trying to think of more runs.
Yeah,
I got a lot of. Being that I have so many indie comics, I have a lot of short runs.
That's true. Yeah, I have a lot of like mini series.
And it's like cross-gen. I don't know if they can be considered long runs, but it's like I have all of I have about, I don't know, maybe half of cross-gen's output in terms of series, but they're all like 30, 40 issue runs.
Oh, I've got a heck of a ton of Dark Horse's Alien material too. But those are all like, 4 to 6 issue miniseries mostly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Shoot, what am I thinking? Neil Gaiman's Sandman. I've got all those.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's pretty long.
I've got all the Morrison's new X-Men.
Yeah, I've Uncanny from like 100 to 200.
Starman and Bone, the 62 Lefty Blues talk about, those are both quite good. I don't have all of them, but I have the majority of both of those.
Yeah, I have all of Hate, except I don't have the Hate annuals for some reason. That's why I have those in the collected edition, but
right.
I never kept track of the Hate annuals. Whole run of Starman, but I'm missing some issues of Bone. I jumped on late in that, and I have like the image reprints of like 1 through 20, or maybe 1 through 28, and then I'm missing like 8 issues. Then I picked it up.
I thought about getting the Bone all-in-one compilation because the thing's like that thick.
Yeah,
it's huge. Yeah. I wish that was one of the books that they would do in like a European album format and break it up into, 3 or 4 volumes or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's also small.
How many pages in the original? In the original issues?
What, Bone?
Yeah,
40 or 50.
No, in the original issues, like the comic issues.
Yeah.
Probably 22, 24, like most.
No, it's longer than that.
Yeah, well, in the European format, if you can stick 3 or 4 of them in one, you get some thick volumes. But thickness is important when you're buying European albums because they're not usually made that way.
Right. Yeah, I just wish Scholastic books. I just wish they were large.
This is Bone 55.
Okay.
I don't know if this is the last one or there was one more. I had trouble getting it down. So there's a lot of it. I didn't even realize it went up to 55. Yeah, this is the last one. So it went 55 issues.
What was the page count on that? Did it tell you in the back?
This one seems extra.
Okay.
This one's got a 40-pager. But I'm guessing it was like 22 pages or something like that.
Yeah, I think they were like standard, 22, 24.
Yeah. Well, this just seems like an extra, double-size extra issue.
Right. But yeah, I agree with Friar Tuck. Starman was fantastic. Tommy's talking about Grendel and Mage. It's funny. I have the second Mage series, and some of the third, and some of the most recent one he did. But I don't have. I love Matt Wagner's work, but I don't have any of his Grendel work.
Yeah, Grendel has 4 very large omnibus editions, and they're now thematic. So you get one Grendel Rose volume with the original stories, plus the new Red, White, and Black mini series that were done after the original series ended. Then you have the second volume, which is sort of 1 to 20 in the main series. The third volume is kind of 21 to 40. In the fourth volume is a couple of mini series, War Child, and the novels, which makes it a bit hard to read because you're reading a comic and all of a sudden you have prose.
That's what's happening with Nexus now too. Mike Barron did a prose novel.
Mm-hmm. The hate annuals are so hard to find because no one bought them. Even hate fans like me. I got the first one, and it was like 1/4 of it was hate, and the rest of it was just, I don't know, other comics that I wasn't interested in. And then it only came out once a year, and I don't think I ever put it on my pull list, so I just didn't pay attention to it. I was like, I'll get it collected one day, and one day I got it collected. So it's like, that's why hate annuals are so. If you were one of the people who bought the hate annuals, you're not selling them.
Yeah,
I have all of Mage, but not all of Grendel, because there's a lot of stuff that was not done by. I have all the Matt Wagner Grendel. Yes, Starman I didn't read until it came out in omnibuses, and then I did and enjoyed it.
it is really good.
One's been out by Scholastic now in multiple printings.
Yeah.
9 small books in the collected, I think. 6 issues each. Is that for Bone? Yeah. I didn't know it was out in small books.
Yeah, it has been for a long time.
Yeah, good creative media. Competent editors are hard to find. It's a tough job, and you don't always get it because you're
Can't be
good at
wrong,
it.
but I was thinking if we'd had competent editors, we would never had things like all these having to reboot universes 18 times.
Yeah, there were. It's not that Peter Bag's stuff wasn't as good as the original series. I think it was. I think if you read, like I have somewhere back there is Buddy Buys a Dump, which is all the collected stuff from the annuals, and it's really good. I mean, the quality of hate didn't really go down. It's just that you got a little sliver of hate and then a big sandwich of comics you weren't interested in.
You've got to have a sequel to that book that's called Buddy Takes a Dump. It's just begging for that title. So
Malibu and Hard Case, never read it. Madman, I have a bunch of Madman and the Atomics. That's for sure.
Several Madmen.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I have a couple.
I like the art better than the writing, though, with Madman and the Atomics. The Atomics had some of the best covers on them. The covers he did for the Atomics were better than stuff coming out at the time and today.
Yeah. So, what do you mean with our own creators and our own properties, or with licensed foreign editions?
I think he's responding to me saying there are no monthly comics there's no runs in Portugal.
No, we don't have right now. We don't have monthly comics of any sort since the Disney publisher went out of business. Our local creators, they only do graphic novels. Sometimes a few anthologies came out. There used to be a few attempts at doing some indie magazines, but they never lasted more than 10 issues. We imported Marvel and DC from Brazil until 1995. Then we reformatted the Brazilian publications. Then Marvel went bankrupt, and that ruined the whole licensing thing.
Yeah.
A new publisher came around in 2001, and they didn't make any money with the monthly model, so they ditching the Marvel license and started doing graphic novels. And that's what they do nowadays. Those guys are in another company, and they're only doing graphic novels. In fact, they don't want to commit to a series of graphic novels. So if they can do something in an omnibus format, it's easier because that way they know that they can publish the whole story without it getting canceled because the previous volumes didn't sell enough.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's what Eric Larson always says. Either or Paolo? I don't know what that means. I missed a few things here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I missed a few things. Where is it?
So one of the good things is that I have a complete volume of the Alan Moore Miracle Man, which does not exist in English.
Yeah, Eric Larson always says when people ask him about hardcover collections of Savage Dragon, he's like, no, because I know exactly how it'll go. The first 2 or 3 will sell well, but by the time we get to volume 5 or 6, no one will be buying it, and I'll be losing money. Yeah. Madman and Atomics, yeah. Yeah, I haven't time just slips by. I don't know how long ago was it that the Atomics was out? That was like the early 2000s?
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Probably around 2002.
Wow. Because like I said, everything to me seems like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
We got here. Lefty Blues, I think you mean Firearm. Oh, that's the Malibu one, Firearm. Right. Firearm. Remember, he had a VCR tape.
Jesus.
And then a couple other things I bought this week. Let's see. I picked up, this is back, Resonant, after a year, from the Vault. I liked this. This was one, I think 5 issues came out. Then it was gone for a year. Then 6th issue came out with a new artist. I thought the other artist was better, but this issue, whoever this artist is now, I guess it's the same one, has an issue under their belt. Skylar Partridge. Really nice job on the art in this issue. Really enjoyed it. Post-apocalyptic horror. Guy trying to save his family. Kids trying to stay alive. These bugs that make your brain bug out. Cannibals on an island. Good stuff, The Vault has been putting out some decent comics, but like we were talking about last night, they might be one of these companies that's trying to make movies. They're
right
with their comics. But that one's a pretty good one. Vault has put out some comics I've enjoyed. Wow, the Atomics came out in 2000. It was that long ago. When did it end?
Sheesh.
A few years after that, probably.
I have like 2 trade paperbacks of Blake and Mortimer.
I'd
like to get more of them because I like that art style.
Here's the thing: the new guys who are doing the new Blake and Mortimer albums, they're all much better than Edgar Jacobs was.
Okay. There was an American. I can't remember if he's American or British. There's one of the two. There was a creator. I can't remember his name now, but he was doing a series very like that, clean line band dessinée style.
Yeah, I remember it was coming out as a
Orchid
webcomic. Yeah, the Rainbow Orchid. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that a lot. And it just seems like
that was a long ago.
Like
I used to read
stalled out.
Yeah, I used to read it as a web comic. Then I think the guy published a couple of graphic novels, but he took the comics out of the internet.
Yeah.
Who's blaspheming?
Right, Garen Ewing.
Yeah, that's the film. Yeah. I like that that style that they use.
Yeah. There are 3 albums, and then they're collected in a trade paperback.
Yeah.
2012.
3 albums. And the one last thing I got this week was a first issue. Fear Case #1. In this black We see it's oversaturated, so you can see the waves in the paper.
No.
They don't know what they're doing, especially in this thin dark horse. See those waves there? That's not supposed to be like that. That means you've oversaturated the ink. That makes the old production guy in me go, oh my God. Have a clue, people. That's not supposed to happen. But this is Matt Kint and Tyler somebody.
Is that from Dark Horse?
Tyler Jenkins. Matt Kint, Tyler Jenkins, colors Hillary Jenkins. Who's the letterer?
Leroy Jenkins.
There is no letterer credit, so it must be Tyler Jenkins, I would guess. But it's weird. The art in it all looks like some kind of waxy crayon or it's like, I don't think this is done on the computer. I think this is done with like a charcoal pencil or something.
Mm.
Interesting. But it was okay. It's another Matt Kint spy story. It's about these Secret Service agents tracking down this double secret briefcase, fear case, which it turns out somebody hands you this briefcase. And what do they say? Give this to the person you most hate, or it'll go to the person you most love in 3 days. And I guess it does bad things, this case. And it goes all the way back to Aztec times or something. Decent first issue. I generally like Matt Kint's stuff.
Gotcha.
But it didn't blow me away. I have no idea if I ordered just the first issue or put it on my pull list.
Right.
I'm going to have to find out. Because sometimes, like when I like the creative team, I'll put something on my pull list right away. If I like one part of the creative team but just want to try it out,
Mm-hmm.
I'll order just the first issue, and if I like it, I'll put it on my pull list. I'll have to find out if I put this on my pull list or not, because I don't remember.
Yeah.
The first read Faust when it came out.
Yeah, that's a weird book. My friend Rodney in college was reading that, and I read his copies of it, and it was like a little too violent for me.
Who did Faust? Was that Vigil?
Oh, Tim Vigil. Yeah.
Tim Vigil? I remember reading an issue of it because it had, it was in the 90s. It was like a popular book, so I read an issue of
Way
it.
over the top. Yeah.
I just didn't get it. It was like, oh, okay. Yeah, short run. It takes a quarter century to complete. Yeah, some are. Hey,
Don't feel bad.
Berlin by Jason Lutz, 96 to 2018, 22 issues.
Well, we got a new issue of Xenozoic Tales coming out either late this year or early next year sometime. So it's been over 20 years. Yeah.
This year, maybe next year, maybe in 3 or 4 years, or 5 or 6.
Do you guys know what is her name? A children's book named Emily Strange?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Mm-hmm. The name rings a bell.
Yeah. There's a series of those.
Right. It's like 20 years old now.
Yeah.
Well, this guy, let me show you, did some of the best black stuff. Because what he was doing, let me hide that.
Oh, yeah,
I'm going to see if you can see it. There we go.
Yeah, that's a nice.
He is using spot varnish as part of his design.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes through, and it's like black and white and red, and there's spot varnish all throughout it, like making a second black. Like it's kind of really cool. Oh, there's a good. So he's like using black, red, and there's a gray and spot varnish, and it's just. It was just one of the more creative uses of black that I've seen.
Right.
And like, when did this come out? 15 years ago? It was, it was a really hot children's book series for a while. I just happened to stumble on it. Where is it? Chronicle Books. 2002. But really nice kind of use of black that, comic books could do this too, but,
Sure.
they're not that creative. because they use spot varnish and special colors on all sorts of other things. I mean, can you imagine that that Spider-Man comic that's been so popular? The Spider-Man silhouette made out of spider webs that's been hot for the last month.
No,
you haven't seen that one on YouTube? It's just
no.
I forget what issue of Spider-Man it is, but it's the artist. It's a side portrait from about here up of the side of Spider-Man's head, and it's like white on black, except the line is all done like a spider's web, so it looks like a Spider-Man drawing out of a spider's web. And it was like, one of these. They just came up with a second print, one of these covers, and it just became so popular they came up with a second printing of it.
Right.
And you could spot varnish those spider webs, and it would look real cool. Oh yes, I did see that. He was kickstarting a mind management board game. If I played board games, I'd be all over it, but I don't. So I'd love if Fell concluded. I have a lot of incomplete runs of books that seem that they're going somewhere, but unfortunately, yeah, that is the fate of the indie comic collector.
Yeah,
Stuff like that just happened.
I have a whole bunch of series that never got finished, and I wish had been.
One of my favorite series that I wished was finished was from CrossGen. Negation and Negation War. I really enjoyed this. As a matter of fact, I'm going to reread it again one of these days. I haven't read it in years and years. One of my favorite sort of. What was that?
I don't think I've ever actually read any comics about CrossGen.
They made some good comics in the early 2000s. They were ahead of the curve on digital coloring.
Okay.
They had some talent. Ruse is really good. Negation War is just one of my favorite sort of sci-fi superhero comics. What else did I read? Meridian, which was kind of aimed at the female audience, but it was a good.
Yeah, I remember that title.
Niven through it, right? That was good. Scion was a good one. I don't know why, but Warren seemed to abandon a lot of his books before they're concluded. That happens. Will Saga get finished? Who knows?
But you know what Ellis needs? A competent editor.
The Path was the Path didn't do it for me. That was one of the ones I tried, and I'm just not that big a Bart Sears fan, so I never went into it.
Bart Sears is an acquired taste, I hear.
Yeah, Sojourn was good too. I think that's the best Greg Land stuff you're going to get is Sojourn. I enjoyed that one a lot. He's finished a lot of them lately. I mean, I've been buying Ellis books for the last 5 or 6 years, I'd say, and I think he's finished them all. But since he got in trouble, he hasn't been back for a while.
Did he finish Freak Angels?
I don't know about Freak Angels.
I don't think he did. I could be wrong. I don't think he did.
The only CrossGen book I ever bought was Abba Badaz by J.M. DeMatteis and Mike Plug, I think.
I do have
that is that.
Yeah, I have one issue, but I haven't read it yet.
That was why Disney bought CrossGen in bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Just for this. I have one that they published, but it got republished somewhere else called Pirate Comic, El Cazador.
Yeah, that one's good. That one came right at the end and didn't, it got canceled. You've never Negation. Negation is not only my favorite CrossGen, it's one of my favorite comics. Paul Pelletier, I think, is drawing most of it. Who's writing it? Tony Bedard. And I just think it's a really, really well done comic it started out as a prison break comic, turned into this big. And it was supposed to tie up all of CrossGen's crossover stuff and then end up in this big sort of crossover because they canceled Negation and started a miniseries called Negation War that was supposed to go like 8 issues and end CrossGen kind of its main story. And it just got canceled with like issue 2 or something. CrossGen went out of business and
it got negated.
Got negated. Have a good night, Comic Crack.
Later.
Yeah, if you've never read Negation, give it a read. It's a lot of fun. It's a mixture between survival, sci-fi, superhero stuff. And they have some interesting ideas in it because the main story is it takes place in this universe where this guy named Charon runs the whole thing. And these are some people, and this group of people were all on Charon's prison planet.
Mm-hmm.
And they escaped. And most of the time, they're just trying to run for their lives and figure out what to do next and stay off of Charon's radar.
Yeah.
And you slowly get to learn the point of Charon. And have you guys read any cross-gen books?
Yeah. Ruse, Way of the Rat. I think a friend of mine had another comic, but I can't remember what it was.
Reading pretty good reviews. Ruse.
Yeah, those were the ones that really didn't tie in. Because the very first 6 cross-gen books, they had some overall story they wanted to do, where all these superheroes got their power from this sigil. And all the stories were separate, but they all had this sigil that gave them their power. And it turns out that Negation explained what that was Charon had conquered his whole universe, and he just discovered this other universe, which was the cross-gen universe. And somebody wanted to try and save the cross-gen universe by giving these certain people powers. And that was all going to culminate in Negation War after Negation. And that's the story we never got to hear the end of. But it's the individual in Ruse, I think in the first few issues, they had Archer, his sidekick, they showed she had a sigil, but then they never came back to it. They ignored it the rest of the series. The Star Brand.
Yeah. The whole premise sounds like something that Jim Shooter would come up with.
Yeah, we just saw that Monster is put off till the end of the spring. It was supposed to come out now, but now it's coming out in June or something.
I don't want to be negative, but I'm wondering if the Monsters project from Fantagraphics doesn't sell very well, if Barry Windsor Smith is just going to give up completely.
Yeah. CrossGen showed comics how to do digital coloring right.
Okay.
Even if today's comics a lot of them use sort of more sophisticated coloring than CrossGen did then, still, that was the first company that got it done right, and people learned from that.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I ended up buying quite a few CrossGen comics in the early 2000s. They had some good stuff. You can pick them all up cheap now. So
yeah.
And I was reading this recently. CrossGen went under because of stock shenanigans in Texas. There was some stock scandal in Texas in the early 2000s that I forget what it was, but what happened was whatever that guy's name was who started CrossGen,
Mark Alessi.
Didn't he die recently too?
Yeah,
wow.
He made his money.
He made his money in tech. He sold his company for millions and millions to some other company.
Right.
But a lot of his money was tied up in stocks. He started CrossGen and was financing it with his millions and millions.
Right.
Then this scandal hit in Texas, this stock scandal, and the company whose stock he had went to zero. So all of a sudden, his money just went away. So he had no money to pump into CrossGen while it was still trying to make money, and CrossGen went bankrupt.
So it was GameStop 20 years early.
What was that?
I said it was GameStop 20 years early.
Yeah.
Kind of. But we didn't have nerds doing things with apps.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, they had a they were one of the first ones you could subscribe to for a lifetime and get and they had you could read all their books digitally, and they started making, movies, like those little animatronic movies of their books. Yeah. You could get those at CrossGen Digital too. I was never into that, but they were trying everything. They had those really cheap anthology trades too. They were trying. I don't know if you guys remember them. Besides putting stuff in trades, they'd put like CrossGen comics, like 6 CrossGen comics from last month in a $10 200-page trade or something like that.
Oh,
so if you wanted to follow CrossGen that way, you could do.
Okay.
An early version of he would have been better off with Bitcoins than whatever stock he had. Who, like I said, the company who bought his company wasn't above board, it turned out in the end. But I only read that recently, so I didn't know that. That was kind of interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
When you break for a few minutes. Woo!
A lot of history we covered today.
Yeah. My personal history, comic book history, all sorts of history.
Other people's financial history.
Fred Hembeck's history. That's not Fred Hembeck. I know that now.
That's kind of funny. I can just see this because I know what Fred looks like. I've seen pictures of him.
Uh-huh.
I get this mental image in my head of him having this printout like on dot matrix printer paper, and it's, what the hell did I do? Oh, that's funny.
Oh yeah, I remember this too. Mark Alessi blames Spielberg for the final nail in CrossGen. Spielberg's company had bought an option for CrossGen and did nothing with it, preventing Alessi. And that was when he needed money. That was in CrossGen's last days, I think, when he needed money, and his options were already sold and didn't.
But that's the first thing that these new publishers do. They sell the options immediately because then they have running capital. Yeah. They can pay the bills and things like that.
Right.
And if it starts going under, they'll never have that money available because they already spent the initial push, and now they can't sell the rights to the movies because they're tied up. So these publishers have 4 or 5 years to get the company running. But if they're dependent on the movie from the money from the movie people, they're never going to survive.
Remember Jim Ottaviani, who runs, I can't remember the name of the company. It's maybe Action Labs Press, but he runs science-based comics. Mm-hmm. And we talked about this a few episodes ago. Him and Xander Cannon did a series called Bone Sharps and Thunder Lizards, which is about people searching for dinosaur fossils and all the things behind the scenes that went on with that. But he got a call one day from Spielberg's office to get an option for that. And I remember he was talking about when he got the phone call, he just couldn't believe that Spielberg was interested in it. He's just like, oh my God, I'm talking to Steven Spielberg. Holy crap, I need to wake up. Yeah. Yeah. It was just funny listening to him tell that story.
I don't know what's worse, selling your option to Steven Spielberg or selling your option to Scott Mitchell Rosenberg.
Is he the one who bought those Rob Liefeld option things?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Rosenberg
That's
was
why
also
I know that name, huh?
He was also the financier of Malibu Comics, and he owns Legendary Pictures, and they do those Legendary comics.
Right.
Okay.
Oh God, I can't think of his name. Rich Cunningham. Ron Howard has a hell of a lot of different IPs licensed and with options right now.
Wow.
A bunch. Yeah.
Because they're cheap when you're rich.
Yeah, sure.
You're running a business and you got to buy options. So.
Yeah, I'd like to have that problem and see what it's like. Yeah.
That just reminded me.
Rosenberg produced Cowboys and Aliens too.
That was not
that was the one that they pretended was a hit comic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't a good movie. It was not good.
Yeah, the comic wasn't good either.
And speaking of movies and comics, talking at my comic shop, I forgot I wrote this note down. I wanted to bring it up. Keanu Reeves has a comic coming out.
Yeah, Berserker.
Berserker,
Minus
which has sold. What was that?
Minus all the vowels in the title.
Hey, we're gonna knock Malibu Comics all we want, you Fred Hembeck hater. Nightman had a TV series, but anyway,
Yes,
I
he
didn't.
did.
I didn't hear what the end number was on Berserker coming out, but it's in the hundreds of thousands.
It was 671,000 and some odd. Yeah.
But here's the question: is it really? Because
Who knows?
here's the story I got from my comic shop owner briefly when I was talking to him this week. So I'm only in a comic shop for like 5 minutes. All of us masked up. He sold, because what he does, first of all, you have to understand my comic shop is pretty small. It's a couple hundred customers. So I think a big selling comic for him would probably be 200 copies of a comic, if it reaches that much. I'm not even 100% positive.
No.
So one of the things he does with these like variant ones, is he pre-sells them on eBay. You know, you want the 1 in 1,000 Berserker comic. He'll
Right.
pre-sell. He says it in, pre-sale. You'll get it when it comes out. Well, they've got a 1 in 1,000 Berserker one, autographed by Keanu Reeves.
Mhm.
He pre-sold 16 of them.
Good grief.
I think he said he got $2,000 a piece for them too.
Good.
So he's got a now. Keep like this is a comic shop that sells a couple hundred is a best-selling comic,
Right. Yeah.
and also keep in mind it turns out Berserker is returnable.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
So, I mean that doesn't really matter to him because he's got the money to pay for the 16,000 because he sold these. But
Yeah.
it said he had to end up in the first thing, he's on the phone with Diamond or whoever, I think that's distributing it. And the first thing the guy asks him is, do you really want all 16,000 copies?
Yeah.
And so they ended up like negotiating it down to 1,000 copies he's getting, because he obviously doesn't need 16,000 copies of the number 1 of Berserker.
Right.
And he needs to purchase them in order to get the 1 in 1,000 ones, but what's 16,000 comics is my entire collection. That's a lot of comics.
Yeah. He'll sell them all to Chuck Rosansky. So.
Yeah. But he actually sells them to Texas, mycomicshop.com too. He sells a lot of his overstock.
Buddy Sanders or Richard Sanders, whatever.
Lone Star Comics, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like, I wonder how many copies Berserker actually sold, because if his actual copies he's getting is 1/16 of what he ordered,
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what Berserker really sold.
Right. Yeah, it would be interesting to see the sell-through numbers from point of sale, at the register versus, how many came, ordered straight from the distributor. It's like how many they actually sold to the public.
But on the flip side, the guy who was in the store at the same time was buying 4 copies of it, all the foil issues. So I was like, someone's got to be buying this stuff. But I was amazed to hear he sold 16 1 in 1,000s, which means he has to order 16,000 copies.
That's crazy.
I know. And of course, the guy, do you really want 16? Because imagine, the guy, you got to ship 16,000 copies. You got to pay for shipping on 16,000 copies. Yeah, my comic shop is a good comic shop. When they first opened their website, I can't even remember, must have been 20 years ago. I ordered like a whole bunch of, first when late 90s when Mile High opened their website. I ordered a bunch of cheap stuff too from then. And then my comic shop was even better because my comic shop had all the little indie books that I was missing that you couldn't find anywhere else. They had a copy of it. So I finished up like some minor indie series that I had 4 issues of, and there was 5 issues. I filled in all those holes for like $2 an issue, maybe.
Yeah, that's where I found my last 2 issues of Gru. I couldn't find them anywhere else for less than an arm and a leg. So yeah.
Nightman had an episode with Manimal guest starring. I don't remember Nightman at all.
Do you remember?
I remember Nightman. They actually showed it on TV here.
TV series that went 2 seasons.
I don't remember having a second season. I don't remember Manimal. Might have been the guy who played Manimal. But they have some things in common. You know, in Manimal, the transformation scene was always the same one. They didn't reshoot it. That's why he always turned into the Panther. Yeah. And in Nightman, the scene where he put the suit on was always the same one, as the guy didn't want to put on the suit. And the scene where he was flying was also always the same one. It was terrible. Like I was just standing like this. You could almost see the wires.
Yeah.
Against the green
comic
screen.
shop had some Kansas Thunder. What do you know about that?
Yeah.
And
oh man, I'm going to go off on a tangent. When UPN first became a broadcasting entity several years ago, they had a really great series that most people have never heard about, and I can't remember the title of it now. I'm drawing a blank, but it had John Delancey, who played Q on Star Trek Next Generation. He played a mad scientist, although he's a good guy. He wasn't a villain. And Richard Dean Anderson, it was called Legend. That was the name of the series. Richard Dean Anderson played a pulp dime novel writer that also had adventures that they went on. It was a very steampunky series. That was a great series. And that was like one of the very first things that came on UPN. I remember that.
What year was that?
Oh, gosh. It was the early 90s.
Okay, I don't remember that at all.
They finally released it on DVD a couple of years ago. It took a long time for that to get that release, but it was a great show.
Yeah, and I don't know how much Steve Englehart was ripped off, but
Russ Heath was ripped
comics creators were.
When on Nightman, the Hoff appeared on the pilot episode as a favor to David Hasselhoff, as a favor to Glenn A. Larson.
Yeah.
I go to Comic-Con to see the sales numbers. Yeah.
Well, but the comics that lasted more than a year always had the statement of ownership, so you knew how much they sold in newsstands as well.
Yeah. UPN Network had them on cable. Yeah. In the U.S., anyways.
Do you remember a short-lived superhero show called Mantis?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I remember
that. At least I remember the name. I don't remember anything about the show.
Yeah.
It's like superhero shows in the 70s and 80s were all terrible. I mean, they just...
Yeah.
Any kind of sci-fi show was terrible.
Some were better than others, but yeah, most of them were cheesy.
Yeah. Scott, dusting off that mind. Good job, sir. They all had...
Man, believe me. Yeah.
One of the annoying things too about them was like everything was limited. It's like if you had a superpower, you could only use it for 1 minute. You know, it was like that was always what they had going on.
Yeah,
Mantis was Sam Raimi produced. Oh, okay. Did that have a car in it? I'm trying to remember.
It had some sort of a vehicle in it. It may have been a car.
Mantis.
Do you remember when they tried to retool Knight Rider as a team called Team Knight Rider?
I remember. Yeah, I never watched any of them, but I vaguely have memories about when
that was so bad because they had scenes with the cars talking to each other because all of the cars had personalities.
Gotcha.
but it was quite obvious that the actors weren't in it, weren't into it, because the ways that they were acting, listening to the cars speaking, which obviously was they weren't there.
Right.
With their vacant stares while they waited for the beat for the line to end.
Right.
Let's see what's new in the comic shop news.
Yay!
Yay! Radiant Black.
Point. Yeah, usually the box art on some of those Atari games were far better than any of the graphics.
They're coming out with a Loki Omnibus.
Mm.
Oh, some new Vault stuff. The picture of everything else. I liked the first issue of that. I put it on my pull list. I haven't seen the second issue yet. That's a Vault comic, right? Witchblood. Have you guys ever bought any of those Dynamite Red Sonja comics?
No.
Nope.
I wonder who's buying them.
Same people are buying Gorilla comics.
I bought some of those like 15 years ago, and they were solid comics. There was nothing wrong with them. But I find it hard to believe that both Red Sonja and Vampirella have been running at Dynamite in miniseries after miniseries for this long.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
What do we got here? Superhero shows back then were like Atari games. You know what you're going to get is not going to be promised on the box. Oh, yeah, those Atari box games are.
There's actually a book that compiles all the artwork they used for the game covers.
I have not watched The Hulk in decades and decades, but it was, if memory serves, it was the only one of the ones that was decent, I thought, but I wasn't a huge fan of it. Great Hope for with Michael Knight's son, Knight Rider. I was never a Knight Rider fan either, so I never watched that one.
I was 7.
A little bit, but I liked Airwolf better.
And know it was funny? Just today, since the Super Bowl's this weekend, and the thought came to my head: have there ever been any good sports comics? There must be good manga that's about sports. I bet they have a category in manga that's all about sports.
There are all kinds of manga-related sports comics, especially basketball comics that are aimed at teens. Yeah.
And I clicked on Sleepy Reader's channel, and he was showing his latest comics, and I forgot about the strange sports of the 70s in DC.
Yeah, I remember several years ago I was working with a guy that was convinced that when Marvel published Super Pro, that it was going to be something in the future. No, it's not. Trust me, it's not going to be. Yeah.
But there's a famous historical strip in the UK called Roy of the Rovers. It's about soccer, and it's existed for years.
Yeah, there's a lot of British sports-related series, and some were comic strips, some were actually published in comics form. The one that was just that EC story that Jack Davis drew with all the gory baseball story.
Slam Dunk, which is okay, but Super Pro just reminded me of Barry Dutter.
Yeah,
I think he was one of the writers of NFL Super Pro. He was an editor at Marvel in the early 90s. He's had plenty of jobs since then. But right now he's living in Southern California, and he makes his living dealing in comics a lot. He buys and sells comics.
Right.
And as he says, Southern California is a great place to do that because so many people are moving in and out of there. There's always people selling their comics collections.
Right.
And two of the things, like he was an editor there for a few years. He wrote a few things, but he didn't write anything big. And two of the things he wrote that he's always laughing about are NFL Super Pro. I think he may have been one of the writers on more than one. And do you remember Night Cat?
Vaguely.
At some point in the early 90s, I don't know,
it was
some singer, dancer, model decided you want to make. She came up to Marvel, and they did a comic about her being a singer superhero called Nightcat.
Yeah, I do remember that. Wow.
And he was one of the writers on that. So every time he buys a collection and there's NFL Super Pro or Nightcat in there, he always shows it to us.
I was thinking the other one you're going to mention was going to be, was it Convoy 1 or Highway 1, whichever. I can't remember the exact title of it.
Does he sign them? Then tries to sell them as signed copies.
I don't know.
Well, you could try and sell.
Everybody on Facebook is always demanding a signed copy.
Yeah, but you tell the buyer, I wrote this comic. Would the buyer believe him?
And it's still worth nothing. Golem's Mighty Swing. Yeah, that's James Sturm. He also wrote one of my favorite comics, Market Day, one of my favorite graphic novels. Really sad, poignant comic. I don't know if you guys ever read that one.
No.
He did I think I first heard of him with the Golem's Mighty Swing, a graphic novel, something about baseball. I don't even remember that one. I have it on my shelf. I'll have to go reread it. But like a golem plant, it's like a mixture of Jewish folklore and Casey at the Bat sort of thing.
Right. Gotcha.
But Market Day is just one of my favorites. Matter of fact, I wrote it down here. Someone was asking for a list of stuff to give people who've never read comics, and Market Day would be on my list. But I remember Satchel Paige one too. I don't know if that was James Sturm too or not. Marvel New Universe had a football team turned into superheroes. Oh, that's right. Was that DP7 or was that?
No,
I remember one big guy with shoulder pads.
It was Kickers Inc.
Kickers Inc.
Oh, wow.
Nightcat had Stan Lee's name on it too. It was written by Stan Lee, supposedly, but somehow they convinced Stan. Was Jem involved with Nightcat? I don't know who Jem is, so.
Jem and the Holograms.
Oh, Jem and the Holograms. There we go. Nope, not that I know. There's an Andre John. Yeah. The Shonen, you can read all the newest titles, free version on your 13. Okay. You know what? I went on the Shonen Jump app when it was just new and downloaded it, and it wasn't ready yet, so I never got anything on it and never went back. I'll have to check that. Oh, yeah, there's another sports one. Muhammad Ali versus Superman from 1977. Yeah. There were a few, and strange. I never see strange sports stories on YouTube anymore, except for Sleepy Reader Today. That's the first time I've seen strange sports stories.
Yeah. Like occasionally I'll see them in like a box if I'm at a convention or something, going through sellers' boxes, but even that's pretty rare.
Football and Marvel Comics don't mix, like Jägermeister and Fireball. Get a Goldschlager reference in there, and you'll have the whole trio.
Maybe they should do a comic about Jägermeister.
Market Day has nothing to do with Operation Market Garden. It takes place in the Middle Ages, and it's about a rug maker selling his rugs at the market.
Oh, interesting.
I'm not sure I can follow that. Sounds complicated.
One of those themes that is right up my alley, but everybody else goes, "What?" Have a good weekend, 62 Lefty Blues. Operation Market Day reminds me, A Bridge Too Far is one of those movies that's good to work to. That genre of movies I mentioned before, because you can put on A Bridge Too Far and follow along with just listening to it most of the way.
A lot of World War II related movies, like Hogan's Heroes, or not Kelly's Heroes. Jeez.
Well, A Bridge Too Far is especially long, though. It's longer than most. I always thought we aimed a bridge too far.
Where Eagles Dare was a good one, too.
Yeah. That one just happens to be one of the ones I'd like to put on every now and then. I had it on maybe last year or the year before, and after not having it on for a decade, I went,
right.
Yeah, because I don't even work to as many movies since YouTube. But I can just put on, a YouTube video of something.
Right.
Listen in the background equals 4 hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something good and left. That's why I also like movies that are, I like talkers, movies that are dialogue based sometimes. So just put them on and listen to them.
Tommy was mentioning he's a sucker for comics featuring boxing. I don't remember where it was published, but about a month or two so, I put up a Jack Davis piece on my Facebook page that was a boxing piece that he had done. It's just, God, this level of detail he put in that thing was fantastic.
Oh, Jack Davis never skimped on the detail. There's a Loki Omnibus coming out. Who would have ever thought we'd see that?
So it had a little print
For the movies.
Had a low-key profile.
Joe Palooka, Bazooka Bubblegum.
Yeah.
Was Joe Palooka in actual comics in the Golden Age?
Yeah.
He was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was he in the Bubblegum first or the comics first?
You're thinking about Bazooka Joe.
I'm thinking about Bazooka Joe. He's different than Joe Palooka?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Did Joe Palooka appear in a comic not in his name then? What am I thinking of?
I can't even remember if he debuted in comics or in a comic strip.
I have to ask Robert Beerbaum on that one.
I'll have to ask him.
Question. Okay, with do you remember the name of Charlie Brown's favorite baseball player?
Oh yeah, I know that one. It's I've referenced it all the time, and it just flew out of my head. Joe Schlabotnik.
Yep, sure is.
My friend
And
Bunch and I.
If you would ever
that.
meet Charlie Brown, do you know what he'd have to say?
That's what we'd have to say.
Well,
No, because he's an adult. He's an adult,
Right.
and that's how adults speak in Charlie Brown's world.
adulthood, that's what he would sound like.
Wah, 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 wah,
Did you ever see there's a parody of Sin City that somebody did where they replaced the characters with Peanuts characters?
Yeah.
It's really,
I've
really,
never seen that.
it is hysterically funny. Yeah,
Sounds subversive.
it is. It's quite comical though.
I just saw who was it? That guy who does what is the name of it? Tom the Dancing Bug. They're like he does comic strips, but they're like political.
Okay.
Is that the name of it? Tom the Dancing Bug? But one was just making the rounds, political one, about QAnon, and Linus was a QAnon believer.
Yeah,
But it was really well.
I'm like, Linus, what the hell are you doing, man?
It substituted QAnon for the Great Pumpkin.
Right. Yeah, that was actually
Well,
quite
it makes sense since Linus believes in the Great Pumpkin. It'd be the
Right.
one most likely to join QAnon.
right.
It was a really well done strip. But
Yeah.
it also pointed out how hard it is to capture Charles Schultz's line. I mean,
It
just
looks simple, but it's not.
it's not. I mean, just look. It's like it was like I said, it was well done. But I was, when you look at it, you go, that's not Charlie. It's a close proximity,
Right.
but it's not nearly as lively as Sparky's line, as they called him, which is deceptively simple in that because it looks so simple, Peanuts, but it's not.
I've seen people that work in the same style as shoot, I can't think of his name. The Far Side, Larson,
Yeah.
Gary Larson.
Eric Larson.
That Gary. That
Gary
works
Larson.
that style, but it's still it's not the same.
No, it's tough to capture. And I think, Schultz is even harder. I mean, Schultz, I think Schultz is a better drawer than Eric Larson.
People. There's a couple people that work in Bill Watterson's style. Brian Kessinger, who does what's the name of the he does a series called like How to Walk Your Octopus.
Okay.
Which is funny, but he does a lot of Star Wars parodies in Bill Watterson style. And I always thought that Chris Iliopoulos owed, Bill Watterson a royalty check.
A lot of people these days have been influenced by Watterson. But yeah, Chris was one of them.
Yeah.
Joe Palooka. Yes, the creative Joe Palooka had some problems. Okay.
If he had problems compared to Al Cap, that's pretty telling.
Yeah.
That's Al Cap had a lot of
Yeah.
problems. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I haven't seen that Yikes comics in a while. But I know who you mean there. I'm so behind in my comic strip reading in terms of books I have. It's like I have I bought all of the Milton Caniff, Terry and the Pirates books and only read the first 2.5. Yeah. Somehow just never got back to them. I bought a couple of Pogo Possum books, like a 2 cent, and just never got to them. I bought a Gasoline Alley book from the 60s and read like the first 10th of it and never got. For some reason, sitting down and reading page after page of comic strips, I want to figure out a different way to read them. I like to read them like one a day, like they were meant to be read, which is tough to do with a book. Except for Calvin, which you can sit down and get lost in.
Yeah, some strips I can binge read more than others. I got the volumes of Secret Agent X9 that Al Williamson did. Those were good.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever had that.
An adventure strip is easier to read in one sitting.
Yeah.
Because it's continuing.
Right.
And also in what is it? Terry and the Pirates. I was having trouble reading the Pidgin English that that one character is written in.
Right.
So I said, have you guys listened to the Stern Show much?
No.
There's one old Stern Show character called Elephant Boy was his nickname on the show, one of the Whack Pack, and he had a speech impediment. You know, Stern always loved guys with speech impediments on the radio. And so I started reading that character like in Elephant Boy's voice with his speech impediment rather than the Pidgin English. And it was like, it read better to me once I did that. It was just like...
So I remember the first, I'd read Cheech Wizard, and I had a certain voice in my head that was, I'd assigned to that character. And then when I listened to one of Von Bodie's cartoon concerts where he did all the voices for the animation and everything, he voiced Cheech Wizard as W.C. Fields.
Right.
And that was not the voice I had in my head. Boy, it really threw me off. I was like, that's not, no, well, yeah, I mean, that's, it's from the creator. That's the way he sounds. It's like, boy, that wasn't the voice I had. So, it makes sense.
Want to go to a supersized collection, Roy? Yeah. Though I love those big Sunday strip collections of just about anything. That's what I want to do. I want to read them. I want to figure out a way. You know what it is? I have to find a place to put them where I can pick them up daily. I actually read a lot of daily web comics. Yeah. I have about 6 or 8 daily web comics.
Yeah, I used to, but I just
got my own
doing it. Yeah.
Yes, I remember Elephant Boy from Stern. That's what was that character? And it's funny because have you guys read Milton Caniff's Terry and the Pirates at all?
I've started it. I really want to read the whole thing. I really want to read all of Terry and the Pirates, and also want to read all of Steve Canyon too.
Right. Well, it's like they have this one character in it who hangs with them who's Chinese, and the whole strip takes place in the South China Seas.
Right.
So like all the characters in it are from the South China Seas, except for a few, the Terry and the other lead guy are both European or American, whichever they are. So like, and their one friend whose name I can't remember right now is this sort of Chinese stereotype who speaks Pidgin English, except he's the only one who does. It's like all the other characters are Korean and Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and they all speak, normal English like they were European. And they're all like, who is this little weirdo? So it's really strange because you would expect that like stereotype Chinese character of the time. Right. Like that's the shocking part is that he's the only Chinese. It's like, because usually like when they always say the problem isn't necessarily the stereotype. The problem is the stereotype is the only thing you see. It's like, in any Chinese character in any other entertainment in America at that time would be the, a Chinese stereotype. What's his name from Breakfast at Tiffany's? When they had a famous child actor who grew up. Oh, sorry, I can't remember. But they had him playing the Japanese guy. You know, they had as a comedically.
Okay.
And it's everybody is embarrassed by that in Breakfast at Tiffany's now.
Right.
And he's kind of one of these embarrassing characters, except for the fact that every Asian around him is a normal character. So it's like a weird thing. Pretty cool. You ever decide living in Elephant Boy's head? Yeah. Eric the Midget or Marianne from the Bronx. Hank the Angry. Yeah. Didn't read any of his droid. It was like the speech. Mickey Rooney. That's the name I was looking for. Mickey Rooney in Breakfast and Tiffany's playing. I think he was supposed to be Japanese. And he had like the eyes squinted up and the fake teeth. And it was like the most Chinese stereotype of whatever year that movie came out, 1950, whatever. So, right. And that's the kind of character this guy in Terry and the Pirates is. Mm. Except he, it's weird. Every other Asian guy in the book is like, oh my God, who's this little weirdo? Why is he such a freak?
Right. Yeah. DC Showcase.
Oh yeah, that is the only way to read those old ones. I can remember. I don't know if you guys follow him. He was the Masked Panther. He's got I think Sleepy Reader and I are the only two people who follow him. He was a young guy, 10 years ago when he started, or 5 years ago when he started. Now he's probably a little older, but he really likes the older comics. And one day he was saying something about, he on his video that he bought, I think, the Fantastic Four, the very first Masterworks or something like that. Mm-hmm. Right. And he's like, I'm having trouble getting through this. The issues just get dull after a while. And I was like, listen, those issues were not meant to be read all in a row. You read one issue, you put it down, you come back and you read another issue tomorrow. I found that's a much more enjoyable way to read like old 60s comics and stuff than to try and read 10 of them in a row. And that's how I read all that old stuff now. It's like I'll pull out like one of my Atlas era Masterworks and I'll read a couple of stories and then put it back on the shelf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tried reading the Rip Hunter, the Rip Hunter archive, like 5 or 6 issues, but after 2 or 3, I had to stop.
Yeah, just read one issue. You can read another one tomorrow. It's cool.
It's not like I wasn't enjoying it. I was, but
yeah,
it
gets they were just not meant to be read that way. And another thing I started reading. Another thing I started reading differently was, have you ever tried to read? Oh God, his name flew out of my head. That holy cow! How come I can picture it? All of a sudden, I can't remember it. That indie comic from the 70s and 80s, really intricately drawn, impossible to read. Oh my goodness! Hold on. This is driving me. The last.
What was it about? Do you remember?
It was about the history of the world. You know it.
Larry Goddard?
Oh no, First Kingdom.
The First Kingdom. There we go.
Yeah.
That's the name I couldn't remember.
Okay.
And I always saw it in ads for stuff.
Yeah.
And always wanted to read it. Got some issues, and it's just too tough to read.
Yeah.
It just really is. So but they made new digital comics of it where they re-lettered it. Mm-hmm. And I started reading it like a comic strip, a page a day.
Right.
And I could read it like that because it's like it's just impossible to read. I mean, the guy's a good artist, but holy cow. And like the first 10 issues are backstory.
Okay.
They're the story of the history of mankind and the gods and this and that.
So it's almost like the comics equivalent of reading the Silmarillion by Tolkien.
Yes, sort of like that. And that's what I would compare it to. And I didn't realize, though, I always thought of what's the name of the artist again? All of a sudden I forget that too.
Katz.
Jack Katz. I always sort of saw Jack Katz as an outsider artist, but he wasn't.
Mhm.
He like went back to the golden age,
Yeah.
Yeah,
doing
in the
mainstream
50s,
stuff.
he did a lot of stuff for Atlas in the 50s.
Yeah. I mean, he was like, and like all the other guys knew, all the other comic book artists knew him. I was like, I always thought him as, because the only thing I ever saw from him was the First Kingdom, which he started in like the 70s, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And he's still alive too. I just saw somebody's championing him. Who is it? Is it Liam Sharp or somebody is championing him and publishing some of his work?
Cool.
They've got a Jack Katz Kickstarter
Right.
where a lot of current guys are inking Jack Katz.
Okay.
What is this? Holy cow, look at the Jerry Lewis specials from the early 60s. I've never looked at them. Do they have a lot of caricatures of stuff in them?
Yeah, what Jerry Lewis, he did the Chinese like this.
Yeah. Probably.
Yeah, Jerry, boy, when he got older, like in his last few years before he died, he really got to be just a bitter guy.
Yeah.
I mean, you watch somebody try to do an interview with him, and it was just a train wreck.
Bitter, twisted dude. He never got over it. That's one of my all-time favorite Robert Crumb panels. I wish I had it ready to share. It was just Robert Crumb giving his history, and it showed him drawing at his drawing board while he was thinking about, like, this is like when he was in high school, the women laughing at him. And he's right, and as he's drawing, he's saying to himself, I'll show them all. And then there's like a caption box pointing to him saying, a bitter, twisted dude. He never got over it. Which so many of my artist friends and I can relate to, sitting at your drawing board.
Sure.
Yeah, he makes early fun of Asians in his specials, which was acceptable at the time. Yeah. That's back how things were. Like I said, that always made the stereotype bad, because that was the only thing you would see about Asians was be people making fun of them. Right. It's not like in Terry and the Pirates when there was 400 Asian characters and one of them got made fun of. It was like the only Asian character was the guy getting made fun of.
Yeah. You guys remember Hop Sing in Bonanza?
Yeah.
I remember him existing, but I haven't watched the show enough.
He was a cook,
to
right?
actually know him now.
Yeah, he was the cook.
Yeah.
How the hell does I know that the Chinese went for the gold rush and went to work on the railroad and the gold rush in California, but how does one end up in Nevada working in a ranch as a cook? And I'd imagine that that they'd have a governess doing that or something.
Yeah, I don't think they want to erase them. I just think that if you're a corporation, you just don't want to mention them anymore. I mean, you're not going to make stuff like that anymore. You're not going to reprint stuff like that anymore. So if you're a corporation, you just don't want the trouble.
Yeah, but some of those works are actually good. They're of good quality even today. It's like when Warner Brothers tried to erase Speedy Gonzalez.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know
Speedy Gonzalez is the hero of the story. So I don't know why the stereotype is bad there.
One of my favorite lines ever was by who was it? Who was that Hispanic guy who used to have a talk show? Oh, what was his name?
George Lopez.
George, what was it?
George Lopez? He was a comedian.
Yeah, I think it may have been George Lopez. Once again on the Stern Show. Mm-hmm. George Lopez had a line that resonated with me. Do you remember when Taco Bell had that Chihuahua as their mascot? Yeah. And they gave him a Spanish accent or whatever, and people got mad about it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
He was talking about that with Stern, and he said, you know what? Mexicans really aren't mad that the dog is Mexican. They're mad that the most famous Mexican is a dog. I went, you know what?
Yeah, that makes a lot of
That
sense.
makes sense to me. I understand that.
I think they should be mad about having Taco Bell associated with Mexican food.
Hop Sing carried a meat cleaver. Yeah, that was like a. I saw that a lot in comics too. That was like the part of the caricature, like the Chinese guy worked as a butcher or something.
Usually it's a cook, yeah, some sort.
And since that was before the kung fu craze, he didn't know any kung fu.
You don't know how confused I was as a kid in the 70s watching that kung fu TV show, and they kept calling David Carradine Chinaman.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow, my little 8-year-old mind could not fathom why they're calling this obviously not Chinese guy Chinaman.
Right.
I had no idea he was supposed to be Chinese in the show.
Yeah.
Well, he was half Chinese. That's why his last name was Kane.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then they did a sequel of that, a TV show with his descendant set in the present.
I vaguely remember that. I never watched it, but I remember hearing about it when it came out.
That's fine corporate-wise, but it's not possible to view such things. Well, it's not like they're going to burn up the comics or they won't be available as scans somewhere. I don't think anyone's actually going out and destroying all the Jerry Lewis comics. Chop Chop and Black Hawk. Oh, I forgot about him. Didn't he also carry a meat cleaver?
Don't know.
Karakaro Tao. Was that the dog's name?
No, that was a lot advertising line. The Yokiro type of yeah.
Kung Fu, the legend continues.
Yeah, that was the name.
The Golden Age Vigilante had a Chinese sidekick named Stuff. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I brought a thought into that one. What's your name? Stuff.
When they do new stuff with the Blackhawks, now Chop Chop is dressed like the rest of them, so it's part of the team.
Speaking of canceling something, I was there when this is like 2003, 2004, when Marvel was cleaning out its warehouses because Ike didn't want to pay, Marvel's owner at the time, didn't want to pay for warehouse space. He's the world's cheapest man. And Marvel used to warehouse all of their stuff for printing, but then they were digitizing stuff. And Marvel used to keep stats of the original art so they could print from it, which is a stat is just it's photographic paper, but it's basically a photocopy. So it's much, much more durable than a photocopy. So all the original art over the years before it would be printed, they'd take a stat of it and that would get stored in the warehouse. But they were taking the stats, they were scanning them in to make them digital. And then, but one day I'm over there, I'm just walking by this one section. And there's an intern with a paper cutter, one of those big paper cutters, and he's cutting up stats. And he was cutting up, and I will go over to look at them, and they're like Marvel's romance comics from the 50s stats.
Yeah.
And I knew they weren't scanned in yet because I was the one doing the scanning in, managing the scanning in. So I was like, what are you doing with these? He's like, they want me to chop them up. He's like, they don't think these reflect Marvel that well, so they're destroying them all.
Ouch.
I was like, what? And then I think that was Ike at the time and whoever their publisher was, Bill Jemis. I think it was those two. He told me. I think he said Bill Jemis told him to do it or whatever. I don't remember his intern. But I was like, he's like, do you want some of them? I should have taken. In hindsight, I should have taken them, but
I've heard so many stories like that. It's like pulp magazines back in the 30s and 40s just threw away original paintings left and right. And those things would be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars now. Bill Stout was on the Disney campus somewhere in California working on a project for them. He said he was just walking and he sees this guy just throwing these stacks of art into a dumpster. And he's like, and this is at Disney,
Wow.
He's known for archiving their stuff, and he went over there and saved some of it. So
yeah.
Oh goodness.
Yeah, it's amazing what goes into dumpsters, especially, and what it is too is people are like, oh, people didn't appreciate it, so they went into the dumpster. I'm like, no, the artists wanted a lot of that back.
Yeah.
They were asking for, they threw it in the dumpster rather than give it to the artist, and that was on purpose because they didn't want the artist. They wanted to show the artist who was boss.
Right.
They didn't want the artist doing anything with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like whenever I hear people say, "Oh, but it didn't have any value," they just threw it. I'm like, no, the artist wanted that all back. They put in hours and hours into that.
Right.
They knew it was valuable.
Yeah.
The ones that didn't think it was valuable, they were just going along with the company line. So many stories about art and comics getting thrown out and wrecked.
Yeah, sure are.
Lost in floods. Didn't Robert Birnbaum say that he lost like 3,000 pages of original art in a flood?
Yeah, he lost a bunch of stuff in a flood.
Yeah. Irreplaceable. I still want to know who stole Amazing Fantasy 15.
Who knows?
Because I've read some things where people think they know who stole it, but no one has ever said it out loud. And I'm like, come on. Tell us the real story.
Which would make me think that person was still alive.
Well, it got stolen in like the late 70s, early 80s. There was a period. I know this is when it happened because I know it wasn't Gil Kane. He stole artwork, but I'm pretty sure that wasn't him. Because people will tell you stories about Gil Kane and what he stole. But it was sometime in like the late 70s, early 80s, someone stole a bunch of Kirby and Ditko artwork out of Marvel's offices and and sold it. And I've never heard anyone say who it was. And I've heard people say like Gil Kane stole, this guy stole that. I've heard people name other names in stealing artwork, but for some reason that was never named. You think Chop Chop, the listener in his costume had dozens of ears on it. I remember that. The listener, he shows up in the goofy comic book characters lists. And I think Gil Kane used to, when he went to pick up his own artwork, he used to put it on top of someone else's artwork and walk away with it.
Oh boy. Sounds like him.
But even that didn't get him banned from the Marvel offices. What got him banned was double vouchering.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that'll do
it. So it's like that tells you how little they value. Got caught stealing artwork and they still let them up there. But double voucher. I never met Gil Kane. I was always told he was persona non grata in the offices, meaning they wouldn't let him up at all.
Oh.
And I thought it was for stealing the artwork. Then I found out differently.
Was that part of the John Verporten money scheme?
No. The John Verporten money scheme, that's a heck of a swipe file. That wasn't really a money scheme. That was just John Verporten was such a nice guy, he would let you voucher for stories before you did them. And then they said something like, I think it was Jerry Conway who made that. It was some insane amount of money too. It was like, because Jerry Conway, I think it was, they said went from Marvel to DC.
Yeah.
And when he did, he still owed Marvel and it was like $100,000 worth of stories that John Verporten let him voucher for early. So Marvel and DC had to make a deal where DC paid some of that money back.
Yeah, I remember that Jim Shooter telling that he was surprised. Where are we getting a check from DC?
Yeah. But the double vouchering story was, I think, when Jim Shooter made a new vouchering system. They just came up with a new vouchering system, and I think you could hand in. And I think what Gil Kane would do was he'd drop off a voucher for the job with like his editor in the morning, and then in the afternoon he'd drop off a voucher for the same job with Jim Shooter. And then Millie, who was in charge of the money there, who's there forever. She finally retired in like 1996 or something like that. She was there from like the 70s, like the mid 70s to, like I said, 96. And she was an accountant. You didn't put anything past Millie. She came down to Jim and was like, why do I see so many vouchers for the same job? And that's when Jim went, and had to make Gil Kane persona non grata for vouchering twice. And he did it over, and he got away with it for a little while first.
Yeah.
I think is what it was. Yeah, but Millie'd been there for a long, long time. That's a heck of a swipe file. Yeah, his Gil Kane stealing art. Jennifer, would do advanced well, the writers would come to him with the sad sack story, and he was a softie. Everyone said he was a nice guy. Yeah, I think it just may have been his general size too, because he was known as Big John Verporten. I think he was, really tall and nearly 300 pounds, but I'm sure getting into that trouble didn't help. Not at all. He was one of the guys there's guys I always heard stories of that I wish I could have met. Like Jack Abel would tell stories of Mori Kuramoto, who worked in the bullpen in like the 70s.
Yeah. And
Danny Crespi, whose daughter worked in the bullpen with me, and she's still there. Sue Crespi. She's been, I don't know what her title is now, but she started in the bullpen in the early 90s, and she is still working there at Marvel in some capacity. She was, but her father was Danny Crespi, the letterer, and
remember his name,
production manager. And have you ever seen Todd Klein has been publishing? They used to, for the new letterers that came to Marvel who were on staff, they'd give them that thick of photocopies of cover copy by Danny Crespi mostly and other people, and they'd have to. That's where they learned to do cover copy, from Danny Crespi. And I think Todd Klein has been publishing scans of that letter copy and has been tracking down where they all come from on which covers. It's really cool. If you've never got to Todd Klein's blog, go to it.
Yeah, he does some really, really good stuff.
Yeah, Elliot Brown has a nice photo of his bullpen years in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I've got a lot of pictures from. What was that?
Then Shaheen interviewed Elliot Brown a short while ago, but I still have to hear that interview, to listen to that interview.
Who interviewed him?
Dan Shaheen.
Ben Shaheen? I don't think I know who that
Dan
is.
Shaheen is on YouTube.
Dan Shaheen, I'll have to look him up. But yeah, he matter of fact, there's it's weird because speaking of, we'll get back to there's some of his photos that make me extremely nostalgic and are the ones from because I took a lot of pictures in the 90s, especially from like 92 on. But there was one time in 1992, for a brief time, Marvel was at 387 Park Avenue South. And the bullpen was on the 10th floor. And they were redoing, Marvel was on the 10th and 9th, 10th, and they were redoing the 10th floor. So we had all moved down to the 9th floor. We're there for a few months. But it was a weird period in Marvel history. And being on the 3rd floor for 3 months. And I don't think I took any pictures when I was down there. One day, Elliot wasn't working there anymore on staff. He was on staff in the 70s and 80s, but he'd still come in. And one day he took all these pictures on the 4th floor, bullpen, and all around the 4th floor. And a few years ago, he put them up on his and his Elliot only has one L in it too. I remember. So if you try to find Elliot Brown, don't put two L's in Elliot. But he posted all these pictures on his website of this brief period of the bullpen, which I have no photos. And matter of fact, I'm even in one or two of them. And it was like this. Those are so fascinatingly nostalgic for me because they're, like I said, I have pictures, a lot of pictures of the bullpen on the 10th floor, but for some reason I had none whatsoever on that 4th floor. Now it's just like, and it's like this whole period of time that's gone from my, so many of my memories are photo based because I took pictures. I remember certain things because I took pictures, wrote dates on them, wrote people's names on them, and I remember them that way.
Yeah.
So this was like a whole period of new memories new old memories. So go to his blog and look at that, I think it's called 4th floor bullpen or something like that. You can find me in one of the photos in my sports shorts I was wearing. Yeah, everybody loved, and I loved that there was battles between, who was it? These were the days where you could smoke in the office too. Mm-hmm. And Rick Parker was a new guy. He's the Beavis and Butthead guy and did letters for years. And I used to hear about the battle, and Beavis and Maury Kuramoto was always smoking and drove Rick Parker crazy because he was, of course, a non-smoker. I feel for Rick Parker, let me tell you. Yeah. But they used to get into battles over Maury smoking. That's the only time I ever heard Maury Kuramoto getting into any kind of battle in the stories of him. Over smoking. Weird. Yeah, man.
Didn't Maury Kuramoto used to tell people that he was a kamikaze pilot in World War II?
I don't remember. I don't remember that story.
I think I remember seeing that somewhere, but I can't remember because there were a couple of Asian staff workers in the Atlas days, but they kind of disappeared. They're usually not well known because those are names that aren't on record. But I think there was a Japanese guy before Maury Kuramoto at Marvel.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know much about the Atlas.
Yeah, so I don't know if it was him or if it was Kuramoto who told that.
Okay. We'll have to look that up one day. All right, we're getting near 9 o'clock, so we may as well wind this down. We've been talking forever, 2 nights in a row.
And we don't have to repeat ourselves.
Yeah.
We don't have to repeat ourselves.
Yeah.
We are that good. And I want to thank all the people who come to watch all of us talk about something different every time.
Yeah, and
you should tell your friends that we exist.
Yeah.
Please do.
Let them know we're alive. And you can go to jaredosborne.com and get some of my links to PDF comics. Matter of fact, I have these all digitally. I'm going to have to make them into a PDF and post it on there next. Yeah. All my Delia Charm stuff. But we'll have to get Comic Crack some of these in the mail one of these days.
Mm-hmm. We need to put those on the comics database.
Yeah. So everybody have a good night. Thanks for hanging out with us and talking comics with us. Mm-hmm. And we will catch you next week.